Once upon a time, there lived a kingdom that had its own luxurious imperial castle, which was illuminated by the white rays of the moon. One of the prisoners locked in the imperial dungeon says that the little Duke Irian did not inherit the title of Duke, but these things still happened after his death. Another prisoner says that if he were still alive, then the madman Vederick would definitely not have become the Duke of Sirius. Along with these men, there is a young girl with brown hair in the cell, clutching her head as if she can't believe what is happening. This young lady is the main character. She finds everything that happened to her simply incredible. The protagonist is 18 years old, but since she was 10, she was already called a genius, because she was a talented doctor who always helped those in need. She recently became happy, having opened her own clinic. She was eager to see if she could build a reputation like other doctors. But this was not destined to come true, as she ended up in the imperial prison. The lady does not understand why she must end up like this. A distinguished doctor lives in the Duchy of Sirius, but recently the heir to this kingdom, Irian Iliard Sirius, died. From his youth, the boy had a weak body, and even in adulthood he was a frequent visitor to hospitals, and eventually he died without taking the throne. His cousin, Vederick Vicis Isidore, inherited the title of Duke. Immediately afterward, he joined the rebels and turned his lands into a battlefield. The rebellion was quickly suppressed by the imperial family. Many men in the duchy were wounded or killed, and the population suffered enormous losses. Trying not to cry in a cold, damp cell out of hopelessness, the main character thinks out loud about why she was locked in this place. She was the best doctor in the area and simply treated people, but the imperial family called her a person who played an important role in the development of the rebellion forces. The lady punched the wall in anger because she just wanted to earn more money and fame and save people. That's not a crime. She frantically mumbled that neither the rebels nor the emperor had anything to do with her and that she was not guilty. The unfortunate woman began to choke on her tears, but then an old woman with a long gray braid appeared behind her and called out to her. The grandmother asked the crying prisoner if she felt unhappy there. She shouted that this was indeed the case, because she had to leave a patient who was about to stop breathing and urgently needed her help. The girl added that she was innocent and had been saving people, not killing them. The old woman asked, clarifying if she was a doctor. The protagonist says that this is true, and that she was a very gifted specialist, and because of this, she considers it unfair that she should die. Sitting down closer to the prisoner, the old woman asked if this was true, and the doctor wondered who this lady was and whether she was a local. The woman admitted that she was plagued by migraines every day, but she didn't know the cause. She asked the inmate if there was anything she could do about it. The redhead sighed and thought that this would likely be the last patient she would help in her life. She asked the old woman to give her her hands, which she did, after which the magic began to happen. A short time later, the healer tells the patient that her symptoms are caused by a conflict of magical forces within her body. The doctor asks if she has voluntarily accepted magical powers from another person. The grandmother asks how she knew this, because she has been to many hospitals, but they found nothing there, and she says that she is talented. The girl recommends that the old woman mix primrose, sunflower, and vetiver, then drink tea made from them every morning. She also advises her to stop eating beef. The doctor tells the woman that she shouldn't have received the strange magical power, but that's just her conclusion based on the results. But suddenly she thought that it didn't mean anything anyway because in any case, tomorrow she and this old lady would have to die. Grabbing the heroine by the hands, the old woman thanks her for her help and says that if she needs anything, she will do anything for her. Hearing this, the lady doctor immediately asked to save her, but the old woman said that she was not an emperor and asked her to choose something else. Upset that she told him to ask her for anything but couldn't do the impossible, the protagonist said that she didn't need anything. Peering through the only stone window in the wall, the heroine confessed to her grandmother that she was an orphan and had never seen her parents. The woman asks the prisoner to tell her more about this, but says that on the way here she dropped her glass ball, with which she would have answered her question. The redhead was already upset that the old woman couldn't do anything for her, but then she started talking about how she could repay her with something. With a sly smile, the elderly woman says that she cannot save her life, but she can give her a chance to survive. The old woman's magical powers immediately affected the healer, causing her to fall to the floor with a clouded consciousness. Tracing a spell with her fingers, the woman tells the doctor to change her own destiny by reversing the flow of time. The main character, under the influence of the spell, closed her eyes and plunged into a state similar to sleep. Opening her eyes, the protagonist, in addition to feeling dizzy, noticed that she was not in prison but in some other beautiful house. She began to wonder what had happened to her, when suddenly, looking out the window and seeing children frolicking, she realized that she was in a familiar place, or rather, in an orphanage where, moreover, she had been before. Suddenly, she went up to the mirror and looked at her reflection, horrified by the fact that, it turns out, she was reborn as her 13-year-old self. Touching the mirror with her palm, the girl wondered why everything had turned out this way for her. Then, pinching herself painfully on the cheek, the girl realized that this was all reality and not a dream as she thought. She recalls the old woman's words, where she said she would give her one chance to survive. The heroine doesn't understand what this all meant. Still, she decided her goal was not to die. First, she needed to leave Sirius, and thanks to her remaining medical knowledge, she wouldn't starve. This time, the doctor, instead of becoming a rebel, chooses not to die unjustly by hanging. Looking at her dress, the protagonist realized that she had worn it on the very day she left the orphanage and got a job at the village clinic. She was faced with a difficult choice that made her think the heroine had to choose between her first day at work or escaping for survival. And, with a beaming smile, she decided decisively that she would simply run away. Having put her large briefcase on the floor, the traveler noticed several children who joyfully called her their little sister. 3 girls ran up to the nurse and insistently asked her not to forget about them and to visit them more often. One of the little ones said that even though she knew she would leave at 13, she still felt sad about it. The main character fell silent and was slightly surprised that the children in her orphanage were the same as when she lived out her childhood for the first time. Then the little ones started talking about how even if their sister's personality became even more unpleasant, her intelligence would compensate. These expressions slightly confused the young doctor. Suddenly, a woman named Elburn approaches the children, calling the protagonist by her name, Richie, and asks her if she is going to see Mr. Zitban. The teacher handed the traveler a notebook and pen, saying that it was her gift, and that she hoped that she would become an excellent doctor, just as she had hoped. Richie was so surprised by this that she fell silent. The girl wondered how Miss Elburn had managed to earn enough money to pay for this while working in such a small orphanage. The healer recalls that this woman risked her life to retrieve her from a basket floating down the river. She is the precious benefactress who gave her her name. But then the orphan was saddened by a thought that came to her. Her ward, all the children, and everyone in the Duchy of Sirius would die if the rebellion began. Looking away sheepishly, Richie admits that she will not go to Mr. Zitban. The benefactress asked in bewilderment what she was saying and wondered where she would go then. The protagonist then stated that she was heading straight to the Sirius Duchy's castle. The woman asked the child in amazement why she needed to go there, to which she replied that the chief physician of the duchy, Mr. Ark, was looking for an assistant. From the future, the doctor recalls that their country was once a peaceful place, but as soon as the heir, Irian, died of illness, a streak of bad luck began. As she leaves the shelter and waves goodbye to all her friends, Richie reflects on how, in order to save the people she loves, she must save Irian. Recalling how she met the heir in the city on horseback, she wonders how he could have died so easily. She last saw him at 19 and wouldn't have said he looked her age. According to the doctor, this guy was so sick that his cheeks were sunken and his cough never stopped. The girl thought that she hadn't noticed it that time because of Viscount Ark, but this time, she would develop her immune system from childhood. The main character also suggested that if suddenly everything doesn't end well, then maybe she should find her parents. Remembering how she talked with the old woman in the dungeon, the girl is surprised that she did not expect that she would pray for them before her death. Finding herself near the castle, the protagonist thinks that if she doesn't find her parents, she will get married and start a family. But first she needs to visit Irian. Richie walked into a respectable office where she sat down on a sofa opposite a well-dressed man with long red hair, in which she was having a conversation. This gentleman turned out to be Viscount Ark 8 Ferrelman, the Sirius family's doctor. He asked the girl if she could immediately become his assistant. The little girl, sipping expensive tea from a cup, modestly and confidently answered that yes. The gentleman stated that even the academy graduates didn't last even a week, and she wanted to take this position, having only a letter of recommendation from the shelter. The young healer said she could handle it. The man asked her if she knew what her letter said, to which she suggested it was about how smart she was. Looking at the silent and indignant Viscount, Richie thinks that since this guy considers himself right in everything, the opportunity to treat the dukes of the Sirius family leaves its mark on his behavior. The Sirius family, whose symbol is the wolf, is a rich and powerful family, comparable to an imperial one. After the duke's death, the Duchess took over the governance of the entire territory. This lady is extremely strict and will never overlook even the slightest mistake, which is why for the first 6 months, the bodies of servants and maids dangled at the gate every day. The heroine thought that even if the rumors were unflattering, they could be believed because the fraud had stopped and she died that very day, just like her son. But then the doctor began to think that this was all strange. Was it a coincidence? Since Vederick then immediately became a duke and joined the rebellion. Ark, saying that he did not know whether to call her arrogant or reckless, handed the girl the letter, adding that he could not accept it so immediately. She took the paper for herself to see what her student had written about her in the letter of recommendation. But what she read shocked her. Elburn writes that she is nominating her candidacy, and although she seems arrogant, she is very smart and strong. The young doctor smiled shyly and sighed, after which she said that her teacher did not know how to write letters of recommendation for work at all. Looking at the gentleman, the girl imagines him enjoying his wealth, amassed through his monopoly on the herbal market. He seems a genius, like herself, and his medical knowledge is profound. Because he rebelled and fought against Vedorek, he nearly died. Richie is very sorry that Ark's character wasn't up to par, but his looks were quite good. The heroine asks if the problem is that she has no experience and is young, but then says that she is confident that she is better than the other kids from the academy. The ambitious lady asked the gentleman to believe in her, but he did not believe her words, and said with displeasure that she was now behaving too impudently. Having laid out a cloth with different plants on the table, the man asked the child to name each of them if she was so confident in her knowledge. Richie could easily name each of the plants: Dadali grass, aram, Baha'i flower, hyrit root, and dandelion. The doctor then asked her to identify other herbs, and she replied that they were saulflower, steppe petunia, chrysanthemum, zika leaf, and Mayonzi herbal fruit. Ark indignantly says that it cannot be that she knows the last flower, because on the entire continent there are only a couple of people who have seen it. She casually waved her arms to the sides and said that she had read about Munzi in a book. When the doctor asked where it could be used, the girl replied that it grows in the spring on Mount Daraphos and is useful for stomach pain and other ailments. And when the gentleman asked what would happen if you mixed Sally and lily flowers, Richie said that the mixture was great for treating flu at the beginning of the season, but it was less effective if you let the disease get worse. The Viscount asked the young lady where she had learned all this, since, as she said, she was only 13 and had never worked in a hospital. At first she thought that if she told him that in her past life she had experience working in a clinic, the ducal doctor would not believe her. Then she simply declared that she was a genius because, in her opinion, this was the best answer that a 13-year-old was capable of. The Duke's doctor laughed at the situation, then asked the little orphan why a genius like her wanted to become his assistant. But suddenly he covered his flushed face in embarrassment and coughed a couple of times, because she replied that she wanted to work for an even more brilliant genius. The man nevertheless told the girl that she could be his assistant, but threatened that if she disappointed him even once, she would immediately fly out of the palace. The main character was not at all frightened by her new mentor's warning, but modestly but calmly replied that she understood him. After this, Ark rose from his chair and headed towards the exit, asking his assistant to follow him, as he would take her to his new quarters. Two maids immediately asked the master to entrust them with this task, but he said that he would do it himself, and not because he liked this girl. Suddenly, in the middle of the road, the Viscount stopped in front of Richie and asked her what she liked. She didn't immediately understand what he meant, so she asked again. The doctor calmly repeated his question, and the young lady, remaining slightly puzzled, said that she liked sweets. Afterwards, the man asked the servants if they had heard what his assistant had said when she ordered them to prepare sweets for her. He added that, although the girl was 13 years old, she was too skinny and short. The maids understood his order, but the Duke's doctor continued to grumble with displeasure, saying that it would probably take a long time before Richie grew up. Ark and the heroine walk down a beautiful corridor. Ark asks the young healer to remember the way to his room, as he won't show her the way again. After some time, they reach the desired room, and the man modestly announced to the assistant that this room now belonged to her. The protagonist was given an incredibly beautiful mansion, complete with all the amenities and luxuries expected of the wealthy. There was also a woman in the room. The girl, turning her head in admiration from side to side, asked the mentor if he had really given her a room, to which he replied that it was empty. Noticing the smiling woman, the Viscount announced that her name was Jenny and that she would be taking care of the girl. Jenny greeted the little one warmly. The healer shook her maid's hand and suggested that she probably had a lot of responsibilities, and Ark told her to contact her if she needed anything. Noticing the large and elegant closet, Richie thought about how girls her age had such beautiful rooms. The protagonist discovered many cute dresses in the closet. The man said she could wear any of them, but the maid seemed wary for some reason. The gentleman, seriously folding his arms across his chest, said that he would throw them away anyway when the season ended. The girl smiled tenderly and shyly thanked the doctor for his kindness. But he suddenly asked her not to understand him wrongly, and explained that he was giving her these clothes because they no longer had another girl in the estate. He also asked her to remember that he gave her these dresses, which would have been thrown away anyway. The assistant says she realized he threw them away to her. The Viscount said that he would soon send her the books she should read and asked the student to learn everything by tomorrow, to which she agreed. The man asked if she would like to know how many books he was going to give her, to which she calmly replied that it didn't matter to her, since she only needed to read them once to remember them. Art grinned and then left without even saying goodbye, leaving the girl in a state of slight confusion. As soon as the doctor left, the maid immediately told the young lady that there could be dozens of books there, and she was worried about how she would be able to read them all. But Richie, smiling cheerfully, said that she would cope in any case, because she was a genius. Suddenly, Jenny covered her mouth with her hands in admiration, and told the healer that she looked very much like the Viscount as a child. This surprised her and she asked again. The woman laughed and said that when the Duke's physician was her age, he told everyone that he was a genius. But then the main character asked the maid to tell her more when she slyly asked why the master had given her his daughter's room. The girl asked if it was true that this room belonged to his daughter, to which the maid replied that yes, or more precisely, that his daughter had died long ago. She is believed to have died before the Viscount found her. This deeply hurt his lordship. The woman also says that the Duke advised the doctor not to lose hope and gave him this room in the estate so that he could come whenever he wanted. The protagonist understood what the mentor had been thinking when he brought her here. She realized that in her past life, she hadn't known this about him. Jenny smiled and told the young lady that she would show her the estate later, then pointed out that the young master's room was at the end of the hall. Peeking out of her bedroom door, Richie asked if she meant Arian's heir, to which she replied that she did. From a past life, the main character recalls that the Crown Duke was only 19, but he looked as if he would fall off his feet at any moment. She wondered what he was like as a child, so she said she'd heard he was in poor health. She agreed, adding that he'd recently nearly died, and the Viscount had barely saved him. According to the woman, Duke Sirius died when his doctor was temporarily replaced. Art couldn't let Arian die too, so he tried his best. The healer thought the sick heir's room was nearby and decided to visit soon. She believes he has an illness that can only be cured in childhood. The next day, Janie, having finished doing the young lady's hair, was delighted that she now looked like a noblewoman. Richie was truly unrecognizable. A beautiful blue dress with pink elements paired with a cute hairstyle did the trick. The assistant said that if you embellished any person, he would look like a nobleman, but she, of course, has a genetically beautiful face and skin color. The maid again said admiringly that she was very surprised to see the female version of the Viscount, but the girl thought that she was cursing her. The woman asked the little girl if she could get up and reminded her that it was almost time for lunch with the Duke's doctor. The little girl indignantly asked her again. The servant said that was true, and he would also check what she had learned from the books. She said that most of the assistants had failed and were expelled. But the girl suddenly said with a satisfied grin that this would not happen to her because she had memorized everything thoroughly. Having led the young doctor into the corridor, Jenny said that she would look forward to her return, and she, delighted, walked towards the dining room. While snacking on various dishes, Ark questioned his assistant about various medicinal herbs and their effects, as well as how to treat illnesses. Richie answered his questions thoroughly and accurately. While the subordinate was presenting the next dish to the master, the ducal doctor, wiping his lips with a napkin, told the assistant that she seemed to be of some use. The young healer found his words funny, and added that there was no genius like her to be found on the entire continent. The man said that she was very straightforward, but she countered that telling the truth was one of the doctor's principles, and she was also very kind and sympathetic. The gentleman said that they are similar in character because he is also straightforward and kind, but the heroine imagined this because she thinks that this is not so. The Viscount also says that he noticed one detail at their first meeting. She says what she thinks. Richie began to think about how she and Ark were different in their similarities, and that this was apparently one of those situations. The man says that he is very busy now, so he cannot stay in the palace forever, but he can return if something emergency happens. The protagonist hears from the mentor that since she is his assistant, she will replace him in the palace and perform the duties of a healer. He adds that this is important work that cannot be done half-heartedly, but the girl says that if the doctor is stupid, then trouble is inevitable. Ark sighed and said that he was glad that she understood that, after which he promised her to introduce her to Mrs. and Mr. Irian soon. But when he said that Baron Isidore and his son Vederick would arrive here today, the assistant became seriously wary. The heroine realizes that the heir and Vederick have been in contact since childhood, because if they weren't so close, the servants wouldn't have defected to the latter so easily, and usually inheritance takes several months. But suddenly the young lady froze, because she thought about whether it was right to settle everything so quickly, even if they were related to each other. At this time, the Viscount, who thought that the assistant had stopped eating because she wanted more, asked the servant to bring additional portions. After lunch, Janie, walking down the hall with Richie, asked her how everything had gone. She said she had been promised an introduction to the Duke and Duchess. Hearing this, the maid declared that she was very lucky because Ark always taught others harshly, even to the point of tears, and only after that did he introduce them to him. The woman also said that he seemed very pleased with his new assistant, and she asked with interest if this was true. She objected that she was very talented, and Jenny supported her, saying that she would be a good support for him, but a lot of work would fall on her. The little girl asked if there was really much to do on the front lines, since she had heard about it during lunch too. The servant admitted that instead of being on the front lines, the Viscount headed to the continent to confirm the information and find his daughter. Jenny told the girl she would be a great help to him. Richie thought only the servants knew about Art's daughter, and it wasn't clear whether she had died or couldn't be found. The main character realized that the purpose of her life is to save Irian, but perhaps she will also be able to find the mentor's missing daughter. But the young doctor thought that since she was planning this uncle should tone down his arrogance. She and the maid were strolling along the bridge when they passed some children playing, which they could hear from below. One boy was complaining to another about how he couldn't catch the ball. The protagonist suddenly froze when she heard the boy call none other than Arian's heir stupid. She immediately rushed in the opposite direction from the surprised maid, who asked her what had happened. Meanwhile, one boy tells another that he needs to stand still, and if he doesn't learn to play, they'll laugh at him. He apologizes for this. This repentant youth indeed turned out to be 13-year-old Irian Iliard Sirius. Seeing this man on the balcony, the heroine was surprised to find that he was very handsome even as a child, but she doesn't understand why another boy is giving him directions. The manipulator told the little Duke that if he ate too much, he would turn into a pig. This manipulator turned out to be 17-year-old Videric. Handing the heir a strange bag, he told him to eat the pie inside when he felt hungry, but not to tell anyone about it. Richie, watching him, seethed with rage, seeing him spouting nonsense. Jenny anxiously asked the young lady what had happened to her. The girl told the servant that she would go there, but she said that she might get lost in the huge palace, but the doctor convinced her that she had remembered all the moves. At this time, the manipulator continues to foist his pie on Irian, saying that it is his medicine, but suddenly the girl's voice is heard, saying that this will not be enough for him. A young lady ran up to the boys and added that the young Duke was only 13 and could not be as tall as a 17-year-old. The Viscount asked the stranger in bewilderment who she was, saying that he was seeing her there for the first time. But instead of answering, the young doctor asked him if he was Videric, after which she said that the Baron was looking for him. Looking at the new guest with confusion, the boy decided that she was a noblewoman, since she had good manners and expensive clothes. Richie, trying not to laugh or blush at his lie, told the gentleman that it seemed something important had happened and he needed to go right away. Still, the boy headed towards the palace, putting his gift to his friend in his pocket and wondering why his father had suddenly called him. As soon as he moved away, the main character cheerfully turned to Irian and asked if he played ball, to which he sheepishly replied that he did. The healer happily said that she was also 13 years old, after which she invited him to play together, but the boy, with obvious embarrassment on his face, asked the young lady if she knew who he was. She said that she, of course, knew about it, and knew that he was the young Duke Irian Iliad Sirius. Taking a racket and a ball in her hands, the girl invited her new friend to play tennis, because it seemed to her that he loved it. He agreed, and, also picking up a racket, moved away and announced that he was making the first serve. Richie thought he would be a weak player, but she was very surprised when the boy threw the ball so hard that she couldn't even hit it back. She was surprised by this, but said with a smile that she would not lose next time. Throwing the ball back with all her might, the main character adds with enthusiasm that she will win, because he now has no chance of hitting it back. But Irian, surprisingly, returned her serves beautifully, remaining just as calm. Prakonitka and her sports rival tossed the ball back and forth for a long time, each matching their strength. As a result, after a long fight, Richie fell exhausted to the ground, gasping for air. She had no idea why this child was so good. Helping his friend get up, the boy apologized to her, but she, thanking him for his help, asked what he was apologizing for. The boy's face immediately showed embarrassment and some shame, and he said that he apologized for playing poorly. The lady asked him what he was saying if she had never hit a shot. He played so well. But Irian continued to insist. He says it's not true because Videric says otherwise, and he blames him for everything. With a dim glint in his eye, he added that the guy thought he was useless and a nuisance to everyone. Irian loves his cousin Videric. After his father's death, his mother was busy with work, and he was left alone because he was weak and constantly ill, and the only one who remained with him was his cousin. Entering his friend's room, the young manipulator suggested that he no longer attend fencing classes. But the heir says that Jeffrey said that he was doing well, to which he stated that the teacher was lying, and he would become weaker if he continued to study. His words proved prophetic, and soon the young Duke began to feel ill. Later, when Irian was simply eating, Vederick ordered him not to eat too much, lest he gain weight. The child said that, on the contrary, Viscount Farrellman told him to eat more, but he asked him to believe him and not the doctor, since he was worried about him. However, putting his finger to his lips, the cousin reminded him that what he was telling him was a secret. The other boy asked, puzzled, why? The young Duke was embarrassed by what his friend said. If the doctor finds out that he disobeyed him, he will forbid them to see each other, and they will no longer be able to play together. 6-year-old Irian was very afraid of this, so he agreed with him because he did not want to lose his only friend. He ate little and refused to train so as not to overexert himself, and so, in a situation where adults had absolutely no time for him, the boy gradually weakened. Still in the court where the heroine was playing tennis with the unfortunate young man, she called out to him to say something. Richie invites him to play ball again later, hinting that it's not worth playing with Vederick. He replies that he's bad at it and that she'll get bored. But the girl asked him what nonsense he was talking about and declared that he played very well. The nurse wondered why the little boy kept talking like that. The heir asked if she really thought so, to which the young lady resolutely replied that she was not lying. The protagonist thought that the situation was not as serious as she had assumed. The boy was thin, but his muscles were in good condition, and she just needed to help him grow. Irian hesitated, but then decided to ask her friend who she was. She was horrified that she still hadn't introduced herself. Bowing elegantly, the doctor said that her name was Richie Estelle and that she was the Viscount's new assistant, but that the heir was allowed to call her simply Richie. Having heard from the girl what function she performed in the palace, the boy immediately said that if she was a doctor's assistant, then she would soon leave. However, the main character stated that she is not like the previous assistants because she is smarter and surpasses her predecessors in everything. Then she said something that interested the little Duke. The girl was asking the gentleman to promise her something. Richie asks him to trust and listen to her no matter what if she is not driven away and remains in the estate. He indignantly asked why he would do such a thing, to which the young lady replied that it was because doctors never lie. With a beaming smile, she promised the boy that she would definitely help him become healthy again. A slight look of confusion appeared on Irian's face, a slight blush appeared on his cheeks, but he himself did not utter a word. After this, the doctor's assistant asked the young gentleman if he would mind having lunch with her to celebrate their acquaintance. Before he could respond, the heroine noticed a man and Vederick passing by upstairs. The girl called out to him, but he didn't hear her, leading her to assume he was already leaving for home. The heir looked sadly at his departing friend and said that he had actually promised him to have lunch together. Richie drew the young man's attention back to her, asking if he'd mind having lunch with her. She thought they'd become instant friends. He finally agreed. After some time, the girl found herself in a luxurious office, which contained expensive furniture, paintings, and even a fireplace. Looking around the room in surprise, she found it very strange that nobles seemed to be eating in their private quarters. While cutting a steak with a knife, the Crown Duke told his friend that he did not know that she lived in the opposite room. She smiled sweetly and said that it was so, and the Viscount helped her a lot with this. Noticing that there were a lot of books on the floor, the young lady asked the gentleman if he liked to read. He replied that he used to enjoy doing that. Then Richie asked if he read now. Irian said that he had already stopped, because his cousin said that it could give him a headache, and if he got sick, he would start to irritate Art's assistants. The assistant was very taken aback by this and asked the Viscount what he had to say about it. She thought those assistants didn't deserve to be called doctors. Wiping his lips with a napkin, the boy says that those medical assistants didn't stay long anyway, so he didn't tell anyone. As the protagonist tastes the meat, she remembers that when they first met, she felt like he was being cautious with her, and now she understood why. The young healer noticed that the gentleman had barely eaten his dinner. She asked him why he wasn't eating, and whether it was because he didn't like the food. When the child replied that Vederick had told him that if he ate a lot he would get fat, the main character was overcome with rage, and she thought that if she heard that name again, she would become furious. She explained to the boy that he was very thin and therefore needed to eat more, as he was still growing. But the young Duke said again that his cousin had told him that if he got fat, everyone would fall down laughing. Jumping up from her seat, Richie declared that this would not happen, and she, the doctor, understood this better, so he should eat well and not listen to Vederick. The kid became embarrassed and objected that his brother was so concerned about his health. But at that moment, the girl assured him that she cared and worried about him much more than he did. The young lady told her friend that he might not believe her, but she was smart and honest and, most importantly, she would care for him more than anyone else in the world. Guided by the fact that she returned to the past in order to save Irian from death, she asked the heir to always remember this. After a brief silence, he asked Richie if she would leave if he grew up healthy. She didn't understand the question the first time and asked again. She still replied that she hadn't thought about that yet, but said that if he was healthy, he wouldn't need her anymore. The young Duke asked if she was smart and doing well. Then wouldn't she continue to work with the Duke's family? The Grain reminded that Viscount Farrellman was the chief attending physician, but the heir suddenly asked what would happen if he left to look for his daughter. Richie, confused by the sudden change in atmosphere, said with a smile that she would think about it later since he was still far from becoming an adult. Presenting him with a forkful of meat, she told Arian that if he wanted to feel better, he needed to eat more. The lady was about to feed her friend herself, so she asked him to say "eh." He agreed with a smile and swallowed the piece. The little Duke was sure he would never forget this girl's words. The man came into Ark's office and handed him a document containing information about 2 girls registered in orphanages in the Urbia region. The doctor read the paper and praised his subordinate, a young man with pink hair and blue eyes named Dill, for his efforts. The doctor continued to look closely at the letter, and Dill asked the mentor if he would go and see the lady today. He replied that it was possible, because he needed to find his biological daughter. A wave of sad memories of his beloved washed over the Viscount. He thought that if he had been with her then, everything would have been different. Then, standing at the pier, he anxiously asked his wife Sione if she would mind going alone, to which she replied that no, because she was going to her parents. The man continued to talk about how worried he was, but the girl advised him to concentrate on his task and reminded him that her due date was still some time away. The lady said she'd be back when the party was over, but he promised to pick her up after work. Sione told her husband he was very funny. Squeezing her lover's hands tightly, thus expressing her boundless love, she said that she understood him and would wait for him. Ark's pregnant wife took a ship to Labelli Island to celebrate her mother's birthday. However, while crossing the territory of the Duke's half-brother, Baron Isidor, she gave birth. The child, like the mother, was in critical condition, but the Baron, who had good medical knowledge, rushed to their aid in time. Thanks to his efforts, the baby was born healthy. It turned out to be a girl with green eyes and blonde hair like her mother. She was a beautiful child. Immediately after the birth, Sione boarded the ship with her newborn, as she no longer wanted to stay with Isidor and disturb him. But, unfortunately, something terrible happened to her, and that was the last time anyone saw her. Immediately after this, Ark found his wife in an unexpected place on the continent and screamed loudly at what he saw. The doctor tells his subordinate that the child's body has not been found, but no matter what it takes, he will find her, even if he has to search the entire world. Dill asked his mentor if the information was true, that his daughter had green eyes and blonde hair at birth. The man confidently replied that it was true, because the Baron himself, who was present at the birth, had said so. In a sad voice, the Viscount added that this tragedy occurred because he had incorrectly determined the timing of the birth, and if there had not been a person knowledgeable in medicine there, he would have lost his child. The servant responded to his words with a simple, "I understand," after which he said that he had heard that he had hired a new assistant. Ark asked what was surprising about that since he changed assistants like gloves, but Dill reminded him that this time he had given the girl an entire room. The doctor grinned and said it was because he hoped she would stay. He also added that Richie's accommodations should be comfortable, so she wouldn't leave. The subordinate didn't understand his words and asked him to repeat them. Then the doctor explained that his new assistant was very smart, and if she left him, she could easily open a pharmacy with her knowledge. He added that if she worked there, he'd have time to look for his daughter. Dill told Ark that for the first time he liked his assistant. The Viscount began to point out something completely different, but the servant said it was obvious. The doctor decided it was time to introduce the assistant to the Duke and Duchess. After a while, throwing a pile of papers on the table, he tells the main character that they will soon meet the Duchess and the young gentleman. He then ordered the girl to memorize the treatment diary he had brought. Gina was stunned, but Richie calmly agreed. After this, the man left, asking his assistant not to be late for the meeting. The maid was surprised by how strict the doctor was, even though they only had 3 days left. But the girl said there was good news. Not everyone was given access to the treatment diary, which meant the Viscount trusted her. The maid went away to prepare a snack for the lady, and she stayed to look at the papers, where she learned that the Duchess was bothered by migraines and stomach pains. She thought that if all the symptoms were described there, stress must be the cause. She also determined that the doctor's prescription was correct. Richie began to wonder why the woman would die in 6 years if she had no serious medical problems. She realized it was much more serious. As for Irian's symptoms, he experiences occasional toothache, stomach pain, and headaches without cause. Sometimes he gets so sick that he develops a fever. The lady realized it didn't matter what she prescribed. If the reason wasn't clear, everything was useless. She assumed Ark was too busy to figure out the reasons. The protagonist decided that before the Duchess and her son died, she must find out the causes of their illnesses. Sometime later, back at the ducal castle, the Viscount presented his new assistant to Her Highness. She bowed and introduced herself. Irian smiled and blushed when he saw a familiar face, and the important woman said that she was very surprised by this. Isabel Cecilia Sirius told the doctor that they said he was always hiring assistants, but always fired them before introducing them to her. Suddenly, the woman frowned in confusion and told the girl that she was very small, but told her to sit down on the chair. Having modestly sat down, the main character thought that the rumors about the Duchess were true. She really did have a cold character. The young lady thought that compared to her peers, Isabel looked young at 30 years old, but her expression was not very kind. The Viscount began to talk about how his assistant, although only 13 years old, had outstanding abilities. He added that she looked like him at his age. He had all the medical knowledge then. The little girl nodded and said that she was like that too. With a displeased expression on her face, the woman asked if it was true, and the boy just laughed quietly. Looking at the nobles, Richie thought that in order to find out about their illnesses, she would need access to the Viscount's laboratory, and she realized that first she had to prove herself to the Duchess. When the man said that his new assistant had outstanding medical abilities, Her Highness said that she was sure that this was so. He repeated that this girl was very reliable, and he knew this for sure because he understood people. The girl mockingly asked if that was why he had fired so many before her, to which Ark replied that he simply hated fools. The doctor asked Isabella if she had any health concerns, to which she replied that everything was as usual. Her headaches were persistent and her stomach ached when she drank milk. Turning his gaze to the girl, the mentor asked her what she, as a doctor, would prescribe in such a case. Richie told the Duchess that, based on her medical history and treatment, she believed her body was susceptible to cold. She also says that she would keep what the Viscount prescribed for her, but would add a decoction of the herb assis, zekron petals, dockley roots, and give up dairy products. The Duchess and Irian looked at the heroine in surprise. Ark asked what to do if the migraine continued, and she replied that she would treat it with cerulone. The doctor asked the young gentleman what he thought, and he replied that it sounded good. The man asked if he was eating and exercising properly. Irian answered with a smile that yes, and this greatly shocked and upset the protagonist because he had lied. Art asked his assistant what she would do if the heir fainted, and she said that she would act according to the slogan of Zebulon medicine. She said that if the symptoms were unknown, she would contact the Viscount immediately. The mentor confirmed her train of thought was correct. The Duke's physician announced to Isabella and Irian that Richie would be their temporary doctor, and that if anything happened, he asked them to inform him immediately. The lady was very outraged by this, and she asked how he could allow some girl to treat her for 3 whole days. He told her ladyship that she need not worry, as he would give the newcomer a thorough checkup until he was sure that everything would be fine. However, the Duchess stopped objecting when Ark said that once his assistant's abilities were confirmed, he would like to visit the Urbia region. The main character began to think about whether he would go there to search for his daughter, since it takes a very long time to get to this place. The Duchess sighed heavily and said that if this was all because of his daughter, then she could not keep him here. But the next moment, the woman frowned irritably and added that his sudden decision confused her. The doctor asks Miss Sirius to think about it and let him know if she does not want him to leave, because he will stay in the palace as long as she pleases. The young lady also decided to say a few words. She tells the Duchess that if given a chance, she will prove that she is a reliable doctor. Although she lowered her head in irritation, she promised that she would think about it and told the doctors that they could go. After meeting the Duchess, Arian, walking down the hallway with Richie, tells her that Viscount Farrellman really liked her. She responded in the spirit of course he would like me, and said that she had not lied about her success. Looking at the heir's face, the heroine thought that he looked very much like Her Highness. The protagonist thinks they both look weak, but that's what makes them look good. She calls it attractive sickliness. The healer remembers that she forgot to say something. She informs the boy that she placed bells in his room and Isabella's, which are connected to hers. She asks the young Duke to call her if he feels unwell, to which he smilingly agrees. The young man then admitted that his mother had been a little hesitant but meant no harm. The girl replied that it was better that way than no doubt at all, and she was sure the woman would accept her. Irian asked if she thought so because she was a good doctor, to which she replied that she was. He laughed and said it couldn't be any other way. Then he smiled sweetly and admitted that if it was true, he would watch her. The main character, not forgetting that she needed this baby to become healthy, asked him to eat his entire dinner today. Arriving in her room and plopping down on her bed, Richie wondered to herself how she could quickly gain access to the Viscount's laboratory. She assumes he'll go to Erbia to look for his daughter. Suddenly, the protagonist considers creating her own paternity test for the first time. The girl recalls that it will be invented in 6 years anyway, and instead of 10 steps, it will include 7, and the detection of results will be accelerated to 3 days. The young doctor understands that she only read about it in the newspaper, but never tried to repeat it, but she roughly remembers the ingredients. She convinced herself that she could do it, and it would be great if she managed to do it before the Viscount left, and she would need the laboratory just in time. Richie took up the task, dedicating the rest of her day to it. It quickly grew dark outside, and the moon rose. Having mixed all the necessary elements with difficulty without making any mistakes, the experimenter, looking anxiously at the book, began to puzzle over what was missing. Suddenly, she noticed a loud alarm sound and a red light bulb in her room. The young healer realized that this was a message from the Duchess, who had become very ill. Rushing to the injured woman, the young lady took Her Highness's hand. She was worried, as such an important person needed urgent assistance. Holding the unfortunate woman by the hand, the assistant launched into action magic, which turned out to be very effective in this situation. After this, the Duchess was able to rise and touch her head. The girl asked if she felt better. She did not rush to answer, but was very surprised when the Viscount's assistant took her hand again. The little girl explained that in such a situation, a direct influx of magic was more effective, and the Viscount was a man, so he could not resort to such a method. The victim thanked her for her help, and Richie asked how she was feeling. She replied that she was fine, but had a headache. The young healer asked if she had a throbbing pain, or, as usual, only in her temples. The woman was surprised by this and asked the assistant how she had learned these details about her symptoms, to which the assistant replied that she had read the treatment diary. The Duchess admitted that her pain was more throbbing, after which the young doctor advised her to take a medicine, which she did. After drinking the syrup, Her Highness turned her attention back to the girl and asked her if she was going to leave, and she replied that she would hold her hand for a while longer, as this treatment would help her fall asleep. The heroine took the lady's palm again and began to heal her using healing magic. Lying down on the bed with relief, Isabella said that no one had held her hand while she slept for a long time. The young doctor also admitted that she was currently doing something that was new to her too. The woman asked what exactly. She admitted with a gentle smile on her face that it was unusual for her to hold someone's hand until they fell asleep, since she grew up in an orphanage. Miss Sirius asked the girl if she knew what her parents looked like, to which the girl replied that she did not. Lighting up her face with a pleasant, dreamy smile, she also added that if she had a family, there would be more such moments in her life. The Duchess did not respond to this, but some surprise and thoughtfulness were clearly visible on her face. Still, she closed her eyes and thanked the doctor for his work, saying that she would probably be able to sleep well today, something she hadn't had for a long time. Very quickly, Her Highness began to snore, and the main character affectionately wished her good night. The next morning, the maid tells Richie, who is busy with her own affairs, that Isabella thanked her and sent her desserts as a token of her gratitude. Looking at the tray with a pile of sweets, the assistant screamed and asked if it was too much, and Jenny relayed the Duchess's words that if she didn't like the desserts, they would be returned to the kitchen and the cooks would be fired. But the girl suddenly fell silent because she noticed a letter from the mistress on the tray among the delicacies. She reads it. The Duchess writes that thanks to her, she slept very well and feels cheerful in the morning. The woman also wrote that the fact that she sent her desserts was a trifle, but she was told that the little girl loved them, so she hired the best pastry chef in the empire. Finally, the lady wished the young lady a good day, but Richie, thanking her for her generosity, was embarrassed because she would not be able to eat so many sweets. However, suddenly she is surprised, as if she remembered something or came up with some idea. The main character came to visit the young heir, who asked her with interest whether his mother had sent her desserts. She said it was true, and it had helped her sleep the night before. Then the boy asked if it had worked. Noticing something strange in the young gentleman's behavior, the doctor asked what was wrong, and he admitted that, unlike his mother, he had not slept well that day. The girl said that it might be because he doesn't exercise enough and is rarely in the sun, and offered to help him today by rescheduling her walk for tomorrow. Then she asked the little Duke for his hand. He first asked why, but immediately granted his friend's request. Sensing something was wrong, the healer was very surprised and anxiously asked Irian if he had a headache, but she soon realized the unfortunate man had a fever, and for some reason he remained silent. The young man, whose face immediately turned red, said that his mother had told him not to show his weakness in front of others. She said that talking about her pain does not mean showing her weakness, especially since she is his attending physician and she needs to say such things. The young healer was overcome with worry for her friend because she saw that his complexion was very unhealthy, which meant that he was in great pain. The heroine lifted the poor fellow from the chair and dragged him to the bed to quickly help him. Soon the patient, who had developed a high fever, found himself in bed, and Richie began rummaging through the nightstands in search of the necessary medicine. The air's temperature rose so high that he himself did not notice how he fell asleep. Time passed quickly, and the Duchy of Sirius was plunged into a quiet, clear night. A few hours later, the young heir woke up and saw his girlfriend applying a cooling cloth to his forehead. Still not fully recovered from the high temperature, the boy quietly asked the doctor what she thought was the reason for his illness. The doctor replied that, frankly, she didn't know, and, as in the case of the Duchess, she didn't know the name of the disease. Then the boy said that he would feel better soon, and she could go. She jumped up from her seat and asked what he was saying, and it wasn't that he would feel better, but that he was coming to terms with the pain, and the more he considered this to be normal for himself, the worse it became for him. But the unfortunate man unexpectedly objected that he could not be cured anyway. Grabbing Arian's hands, Richie promised that she would try her best to cure him, because she was a very good doctor herself. She persistently, with a burning desire to help the heir, asked him to trust her. He, with a descending blush on his face, simply looked into her eyes, unable to utter a couple of words. Some time passed, and the main character accidentally fell asleep on the heir's bed, and he, apparently, no longer wanted to sleep. As he rose from his bed and removed the cooling bandage, he realized that the pain had gone away, and his complexion looked completely healthy. Noticing how sweetly his girlfriend fell asleep next to him, he smiled sweetly and thanked her out loud for everything. The next day, when he came to the protagonist's room, Arian thanked her for the treatment and said that he was already feeling better. She laughed and said that, of course, since no one else but she had treated him. The young gentleman asked her if she was tired after spending the whole night. Then the heroine suggested that he go outside today and exercise as he had promised her, but he suddenly became embarrassed, as if he did not want to. Richie immediately turned on the actress and pretended that she was very tired, taking care of him all night and spending a lot of her strength and magic on it. The heir, believing his friend was tired, immediately changed his mind and agreed to go to the exercises, which made her very happy, and she asked if it was true. The young man said yes, and he would go there for her sake, since he didn't want her to feel tired because of him. The healer was surprised at this rarity. The Viscount's assistant told her friend that there was a way to make sure he slept well without her bothering him at night. The child asked what this method was, but the doctor suddenly came closer to him and asked if he would listen to her. She extended her little finger to the young Duke, telling him to promise to carry out her plan. At first, he hesitated. Still, he gave his word to his girlfriend, but indicated that his promise would be temporary. That secret turned out to be simple running, which Arian did, squeezing every ounce of energy out of himself, while Richie just watched him and told him not to stop. She waved her hand cheerfully at him, supporting him in this way, and shouted that he needed to run one more lap, because he was doing well. Hearing encouragement from his devoted fan, the boy, having gained strength, continued running in circles, dripping with sweat. The doctor thought that if he exercised hard, his appetite would increase, and during puberty, sleep and food are the most important things. She told her friend to run 2 more laps, and then they would go to dinner. Time flew by, and when the sun was already setting outside, the children came to the young Duke's office, where a sumptuous dinner had already been prepared. The boy asked if he could eat all the food, to which the girl replied that he needed to get nutrients depending on his activity level. He said that he understood everything, after which he began to eat the delicious dishes with pleasure. Richie thought about how this was similar to how she had cared for her younger siblings at the orphanage. Unexpectedly, she told the young gentleman that after he ate, they would read a book. This intrigued the boy, and he asked her about it again. The main character explained that he needed to get back to his studies as soon as possible, but if he suddenly wanted to sleep, he should tell her. However, having started reading, the healer was surprised that Arian still did not want to sleep, although she thought that training and a heavy book would lull him to sleep. She is very angry at the realization that she thought of giving a book to someone who loves to read. It is like indulging the devil. Then, the assistant herself said that it was time to take a nap, and promised to help the patient fall asleep with the help of magic. She took the young Duke's hand and closed her eyes to use her power, but asked her friend to close his eyes too so that she could succeed. But he suddenly asked if she was comfortable working like that. The girl, swayed by such an unexpected question, even lost her focus. Arian tells Richie that she can sit next to him, because his bed is already big, and she is probably very tired. The protagonist immediately thought that there was no subtext here, but for her, lying in the same bed together felt a little strange. Finally, she replied that everything was fine and that she would just wait until he fell asleep and leave. He agreed and then lay down on the bed. Suddenly, the heroine also felt that she was very exhausted because she wakes up early in the morning, and in the evenings she is busy developing a paternity test, so she does not have time to get a good night's sleep. She hunched over her heir, wanting to catch a nap too. But then she began to drift off into some mysterious vision of her own. Richie opened her eyes and somehow found herself back in her adult body. She was lying in bed with a man who was calling her, a blanket pulled over him. She is confused by the fact that she found herself in a bed in which, strangely enough, she feels very warm, and some stranger is holding her hand. The girl tried to look the young man in the face, but, surprisingly, she couldn't do it, since she simply couldn't see him. The man started talking about how she told him that she would not lie because she was the smartest and most honest person in his circle, and only she always thought about him. Stroking the heroine's hair, he also said that for him, every word she said was true. With a smile, the stranger asked if he could leave her, since he was not that stupid. The main character was stunned by the fact that she did not know who this person was, and could not see his face, and she could not even move. Suddenly, Richie wakes up from his vision, abruptly rising from his bed with a surprised face. She looked around and realized that she was still in the young master's room. Looking at how Irian was holding her hand and he was fast asleep, she realized that everything that had just happened was just a dream. The Viscount, hearing his assistant ask him for Aesop petals, replied with a categorical no. She was creating a paternity test for the heroine, and for the final stage, she needed these petals. The girl was upset to hear the refusal, although she understands that Aesop is a poisonous plant, so it is unlikely that he will simply agree to give it to her. Approaching his assistant sternly, he said that she had only two options: turn around and leave his office, or explain why she needed them. Ark frowned menacingly and added that no matter what she chose, the outcome would be the same. Looking sadly at her mentor, Richie thought that it was probably difficult for him to trust a child who had been in the palace for such a short time. Handing the man a stack of papers, she asked if he could look at her report first, as then he would understand why she needed the plant. He agreed, but warned that this would not change his decision. But the man was very surprised when he realized that the document was about research on a method for simplifying the paternity test procedure. The girl said she was brewing a potion, to which she only needed to add Aesop, and if she succeeded, the paternity test procedure would be sped up to 4 days. The Viscount, covering his mouth with his hand in surprise, said in a trembling voice that this was simply unbelievable. The lady also explained that all that remained was to determine the exact number of Aesop petals, and if he did not believe her, he could continue the experiment himself. Having placed the document on the table, the man calmly asked his assistant how she came up with this idea. She replied smilingly that she was just being smart, thinking that she still shouldn't tell him about her reincarnation. She confessed to her mentor that she had started this in order to help him, and asked him to take it as gratitude for the fact that he had given her a room. The doctor suddenly looked away from his assistant in embarrassment, and the heroine clenched her fists, hoping that she would agree to give her the poisonous plant. Realizing that her pleas were not entirely convincing, the protagonist bowed politely and said that she would still very much like to finish the experiment. After thinking about whether to try to convince Ark later, she went ahead and said casually that if she had a proper lab, the result would be better. Later, the ducal doctor strolled down the corridor, looking at his assistant's research on speeding up paternity testing. After reading about the experiment in more detail, he realized how seriously the girl approached her task. The man believes that Richie is completely different from all his assistants who came before. She is the youngest and the smartest among them, and she also does not mock anyone or behave willfully. He grinned when he realized that this genius child was very similar to him. As he passed the heroine's choir, whose door was ajar, the Viscount decided that he should think about how his feet were carrying him to his daughter's room. He approached the door and leaned against it to see what his assistant was currently doing. The young healer, sitting on the bed and surrounded by various books, studied various medical materials, simultaneously working with potions. Continuing to walk down the corridor, the doctor remembers how the assistant said that it would be better if she had her own lab, to which he agrees. But then, on his way, Ark meets the maid Janie, who joyfully greets him. He said that she had appeared at the right time, because he wanted to ask her something. Had she noticed anything suspicious in Richie's behavior? The woman said that she had not noticed anything suspicious, but one day something unusual happened, and the doctor asked what exactly. The maid says that she has long wanted to tell him that the young lady has her own notebook, which she always carries with her. The servant informs that on the day when she was spying on the young master, she made her entries in this diary. Taking out a notebook with a white cover, Jenny cheerfully said that she made a copy of the notebook with those notes, just in case. Taking the copy in his hands, the Viscount thought it was her treatment diary. He saw that the introduction of magic and all the details were carefully recorded, and there was nothing dangerous about it. Suddenly, the ducal physician turned to the maid and said with a gentle smile that she need no longer keep an eye on his new assistant. He asked the maid to bring Richie dessert and tell her it was a token of his gratitude and an apology for his mistrust. He explained that it wasn't surprising he'd been following her. He was forced to do so. The doctor added that he'd given his daughter's room to her for free. But suddenly, Jenny said that wasn't the case. The Duchess had recently sent her sweets. The gentleman asked for more details, and the servant reported that Isabella had recently called her because of a migraine and was probably satisfied with the treatment. Ark said he now understood why the mistress had asked about Richie, surprising the maid. He then asked the woman to find out what else the girl liked. She reminded him that he could ask about it directly, but the doctor said that then his assistant might think that he was very pleased with her. Finally, with a blush appearing on his cheeks, he asked Janie not to tell the Duchess about this and let it remain their secret. The next day, the protagonist and the young gentleman went hiking in the mountains. Green foliage and warm rays of sunshine surrounded them. The girl asked her friend to walk a little further, but he was so exhausted from the walk that he could not stop breathing and sweating. The lady asked him if he was all right, and he sat down on a stump and did not give a clear and intelligible answer. Richie thought it was a bit of a struggle for Arian, but he'd definitely be able to reach the middle of the mountain. She was sure he'd become much more resilient and looked healthier. Guided by the magnificent scenery surrounding them, the girl suggested stopping and resting there, which the two knights helped them with, spreading a blanket on the grass and preparing snacks in a basket. The young doctor, sitting down with the boy on a stump, agreed with his opinion that this place was very cozy. The young man admitted that it was difficult for him to walk in the sun, but he felt good and light. She said that, as far as he could see, she was right. Looking at her patient, Richie thought that every feature of his was beautiful and that he would be very handsome when he grew up. These thoughts made the little girl laugh, and the perplexed heir asked why she was laughing. She said she was just glad he was out for a walk. Irian said that it was because Vederick told him that there were a lot of cherry trees here, and the girl, hearing this, suggested picking a lot of berries. The young lady rose to her feet, saying that she would go and pick a cherry, and her friend, also jumping up, declared that he would go with her. Turning to the little Duke, she warned him that he might slip, so he needed to be more careful. But suddenly the girl saw a terrifying picture. A large, scary brown snake was crawling closer and closer to the young man's leg. The next moment, something unpredictable happens. The beast, bearing its sharp, poisonous fangs, pounced on Irian. Terribly frightened, the main character rushed towards her friend so hard that her hat flew off her head, in order to try to save him from this situation. She pushed the bewildered Irian aside as the poisonous snake continued to slither quickly towards them, eager to attack. Unfortunately, the animal succeeds in its plan, and its poisoned fangs sink into the protagonist's skin. Richie screamed loudly and clenched her teeth in hellish pain, and the heir, horrified and not understanding what was happening, continued to call her, but she, it seemed, did not hear him and lost consciousness. Suddenly, the protagonist, as if nothing had happened, stands in front of the window, gazing at the winter landscape. A tall man comes up to her from behind and, covering her with a robe, says that she might catch a cold because it's the middle of winter, and even her hair is wet. The lady accepted the young man's advances and greeted him. Surprisingly, the suitor turned out to be Arian, who looked as old as Richie. The girl calmly said that she was used to it, to which the Duke replied that if it was a burden to her, then he would do it himself. The gentleman, stroking his girlfriend's hair, adds that he is ready to do anything, she just needs to say so. Suddenly, His Highness asked the doctor if she was tired after taking a bath, but she suddenly blushed and asked what he was saying. Gently touching his lips to a strand of the heroine's hair, he coquettishly asked her if any strange thoughts had crept into her head. The protagonist simply looked at his face in bewilderment, her cheeks blushing. Then she said indifferently that she didn't think about anything like that, to which the man said that he, on the contrary, did think about it. Richie pounced on her friend's chest, childishly beating it with her fists, asking what kind of speech he was talking about, but he stood there calmly and smiled. Suddenly, Irian grabbed the healer's palms and with a sad expression on his face, asked her not to hit him in the chest, because she could hit her own hands, but it would be better to hit him in the face if she wanted to. With a sad look in his eyes, he explained that if she got hurt even a little, he would be very scared. Taking the girl into his arms, the young man explained that it was enough for him to feel the ground slipping out from under her feet just once. Frowning, the man admitted that he had never felt so hateful as he did then, because even then, he knew that Richie was his whole universe. The main character looked at the man's face in bewilderment and noticed drops dripping down. She thought he was crying. The girl gradually began to regain consciousness, and the first thing she saw was an excited little Edian running up to her and calling her. When the fog in her eyes completely cleared, she saw the young Duke weeping bitterly, bending over her face. Half asleep, the victim asked the boy if it was him, and he, still sobbing, asked his friend if she was okay. After clearing her throat, the doctor asked the young man if everything was okay with him, to which he replied that he was, and reminded her that she had not regained consciousness for 2 days. Richie said that if the snake had bitten him, it would have been impossible to cure him, but she only needed to take any medicine, so it was good that she was bitten. Irian asked her for forgiveness, because it happened because he was weak, but the lady said that it was not his fault, and she already felt much better. The little Duke, approaching the heroine, asked her to promise that she would never do such a thing again. Even though he held the unfortunate woman's hand, she replied that she could not do that, because his health was her top priority. He wanted to object, but suddenly the Viscount entered the room and asked his assistant what would happen if she came across a poisonous snake. The man said with displeasure that in that case she would have died on the spot. The Duchess appeared behind him, her face expressing regret. The protagonist said she was sure she'd stumbled upon an Erbonian python, and they would have been able to cure her anyway. Ark said it really was that simple. Mrs. Isabella approached the victim and thanked her for saving her son, and asked her to accept her deepest apologies. The heroine replied that she was fine now, and if she were living in a shelter now and not in a palace, she would not have received such treatment. Her Highness looked at the girl with a hint of sadness on her face, and the doctor frowned, but they both remained silent. Finally, the man suggested that everyone leave Richie's room since everything was okay and let her rest. The young Duke agreed. But the little girl confessed to her mentor that she had one request for him, and he immediately said that if she was talking about sleeping pills, then they were already lying next to her. Richie thought the Viscount had taken good care of her as a patient, which meant he was an excellent doctor, but she wasn't sure what happened then. After taking a sleeping pill and going to bed, she remembered Vederick saying the mountain was full of cherries. Now she has bad associations with that name. Slowly falling asleep, the girl also remembered that she had just dreamed something, but she did not remember anything. Thanks to the Viscount's medication, the heroine recovered quickly. She was unable to attend school, but she was able to gain the trust of the people at the estate. Recently, Ark again told the Duchess and Irian that he would leave his assistant here and go to Irbia to search for his daughter. This time, Her Highness and her son easily agreed, without even arguing about anything. The young gentleman completely trusted the main character and wanted to spend every day with her. And what's more, Isabella, having laid out a variety of desserts on the table for the girl, said that these sweets were simply delicious and asked the little one to try the best of them. Enjoying the cake, she agreed, saying the creations were amazing. The woman added that many chefs had tried to create something unusual. Suddenly, the Duchess asks the girl to choose the dessert she liked the most, and she will hire the chef who prepared it. The healer became embarrassed and said that these cooks already had work, to which Miss Sirius promised to pay them all double. Richie thought she was forgetting that Isabella had a lot of money. She was shocked that in his past life, Vederick had turned this estate into ruins. Her Highness, sipping tea, asked her young interlocutor whether she thought she was being too frivolous about hiring. The doctor said that wasn't the issue and asked if a chef's skills beyond desserts weren't important. The lady, putting down her cup, replied that they weren't. The lady once again stated that their business was to create delicious desserts, and the protagonist realized that it seemed she would not be able to convince her otherwise. She thought with an embarrassed smile that something was wrong here, and whether everything ended well, since she was simply bitten by a snake. When Isabella said she was doing well thanks to her, Richie advised adding dandelion milk to the water before taking a bath. The girl also said that thanks to this, the skin on her face will become better and softer, but the Viscount hadn't recommended this to Her Highness before because it was related to cosmetology. The woman thanked her. However, the madam asked the young healer to take care not only of her, but also of Ariana. She replied that it was her duty, and the boy was quickly getting better thanks to the basic exercises that he performed strictly according to plan. After this, the Duchess looked down and said that she felt very embarrassed about that incident with the snake, because it was she who should have protected her son. Miss Sirius told the young doctor that her baby had often been ill as a child, but she had always been too busy to care for him. Because of this, he was left alone with his problems for a long time. The Duchess admitted that she was convinced that she could not give in, as this would weaken her son's status, but this only widened the gap between them. But then Richie, with a beaming smile, told the woman that she shouldn't worry and that she would take good care of Ariana. Isabella smiled and said that although she and her son were the same age, for some reason, she felt that he could rely on her. She then asked the heroine if the Viscount had given her these dresses, saying they were beautiful but old-fashioned. She replied that they belonged to his daughter. When the little girl said that he had given them to her because there was no one to wear them, the Duchess became very angry and said that men were completely insensitive. With a serious expression on her face, the lady promises to give Jenny a list of all the tailors in the capital so that the orphan can choose the clothes she likes. Richie said that compared to what she had worn before, these dresses were very nice, so she was grateful for everything they had given her. But Madame angrily reminded her that these dresses were going to be thrown away. She jumped up from her seat and declared that she could not silently watch such an attitude towards the child, so she asked the lady to list everything she liked. She, although feeling embarrassed by the woman's unexpected change in mood, agreed. Quite a bit of time has passed since the main character found herself in the Duke's palace, but her shock still hasn't passed. Richie was quietly reading a book when a maid entered her room and asked her if she had enjoyed her dinner, to which she replied that she had. Then, Jenny asked about her dress, and the girl said that she liked everything about it. But the subordinate asked the lady to pay attention to the huge stacks of papers in her room and added that the Duchess had recently sent her a list of tailors. The young healer explained that this was all because Isabella and the Viscount had different tastes. The servant asked the young lady if she needed anything else to make her life comfortable, but she said no. Then the woman asked if she needed more books. The assistant said smilingly that she had everything she needed and that there was a lot to see in the Duke's castle. Jenny asked her if she needed friends her own age and if she was lonely, and she replied that no, but if she did, then let it be a smart young man of about 19, because her peers were too childish. But then, Richie felt something was wrong, and sternly asked the maid what had happened and why she had so many questions. When the maid admitted that the whole thing was that Art asked her to ask her about what she liked, the girl asked why. The woman suggested that it seemed that the doctor wanted to apologize to her in this way for doubting her and to thank her. The doctor asked why he didn't ask her directly, and Jenny said that his character wouldn't allow him to do that, which made the orphan laugh. But suddenly, the main character had an unexpected idea. If, in the mentor's opinion, she was doing well, then she could ask for whatever she wanted. Then she calmly began to talk about how, in fact, there was one thing she really desired. The servant happily asked what it was. Richie said that if she had her own lab, she could process various herbs there and conduct more experiments. The way she asked for it looked sweet and graceful, but in reality, the girl really wants to be allowed to use the Viscount's laboratory. Upon hearing that the protagonist wanted to be given a laboratory for research, the Viscount became slightly indignant. He reminded the maid that the Duchess had actually told him to buy a lot of dresses, but she had said that the girl seemed indifferent to dresses. The man asked if that was all, and Jenny added that she had reacted that way to the lady's request too, but she also said that she would like to have an intelligent friend who was about 19 years old. As soon as the maid said that the assistant wanted a 19-year-old friend, Ark's gaze immediately fell on Dill, who was also in his office. The doctor asked the boy how old he was, and he replied that he was 18. The Viscount, already considering him as a candidate, said he was certainly not a genius, but he was smart. He was very embarrassed, but thanked his friend for the compliment. The doctor asked him if he would respond to his precious compliment with just one "thank you," and he said that was exactly it. Ark, whose train of thought had already begun to take shape, asked Dill if he would have any business if he went to Irbia. The guy, starting to sweat from excitement, said that it would be so, but then asked about his vacation. The doctor, as the main villain, declared that if the Duchess ordered the tailor to sew dresses for Richie, he would give her Delia and the laboratory as a gift. The Viscount's subordinate fell into despair because he had been given more work and he had planned his vacation so perfectly. Nevertheless, the man promised to provide the girl with the best laboratory and ordered the young man to be a good friend to her so that she would not be lonely. He, thinking that he had no choice anyway, agreed to become a mentor. But then the guy said that Richie could use his lab, but the man objected that her own would be better and more beautiful. The pink-haired man reminded the chief that this was not his estate, but the Duke's, but he asked him to quickly go and get permission for the laboratory. Meanwhile, Richie, in the company of Arian, spends time in the garden, eating various sweets. The boy noticed his friend deep in thought. The doctor was actually wondering why there had been no news about the lab yet. She suspected there simply wasn't enough space. Suddenly, a man appeared behind the main character and politely greeted her. It turned out to be the Viscount's subordinate, who introduced himself to the little girl as Dill Molekin. The boy explained that Ark had sent him to become her friend. Hearing this, the protagonist grabbed her head, thinking about what would happen to her laboratory. Richie asked the guy if the Viscount had sent her a new friend as a gift. He said that was true, and he would also be responsible for building the research room. The boy's final words greatly shocked the girl. But suddenly the assistant had a question and asked if she could use the mentor's laboratory whenever she wanted. Dill smiled as he relayed the man's words that her laboratory would be larger, brighter, and more stylish. She was very happy about this and said that she would not refuse, thinking that although she did not know why it was needed, she had no reason to refuse. The young man asked the young lady if she would like to build more greenhouses, as there was enough space for this, to which the lady said that would be excellent. The pink-haired man said that, in that case, they would discuss the details later. The healer asked him to work on it, to which he agreed, since it was his job. The doctor was embarrassed when Dill said that he was actually on vacation, but he was sent here because she said that she needed a smart friend of about 19, but despite this, he was in a good mood. The young man bowed politely to the young lady and said that they would see each other later, to which she agreed. Thinking about how she would soon have her own research room with her own greenhouse, Richie began to smile. Remembering how she worked as a doctor in a modest hospital in her past life, she realizes that she never even dreamed of such a thing. Without even noticing something strange, the little girl began to dream of having a huge table and laboratory equipment in her own laboratory. But suddenly, she notices that the atmosphere around Irian has changed somehow. The lady looked at her friend's face, which turned out to be very gloomy. He simply looked at her with a cold gaze without saying a word. Richie was a little scared and asked if he was okay, but he didn't answer her, continuing to frown. The doctor wanted to touch the young duke's forehead to check if he had a fever, but he removed her hand and asked if she needed such a friend. His girlfriend said, not really, but a friend who is smarter and older is better anyway. Irian pouted even more and asked why she needed a 19-year-old friend. The heroine, thinking that before she was reborn she only thought about age, admitted that she believed that it would be easier for them to communicate this way. The young gentleman, whose mood began to feel sad and melancholy, asked the healer if she liked the guy. The protagonist was slightly surprised by this question, and she thought about the fact that she had never met Dill before. Grabbing his friend's hand, the boy asked Richie if she wanted to talk to him because she was too young. Then he desperately asked his friend if she even considered him her friend. The main character let out a surprised cry and asked what nonsense he was talking about. She replied that it was completely wrong. Removing her hand, the lady explained to the child that he was a nobleman, the heir of the Sirius family, and she was a simple girl, so they could not be friends. After these words, the baby immediately wilted, and Richie realized that she had upset him with her expression. To lift the unfortunate man's spirits, she admitted that the relationship between them was much closer. The girl says these words because Vederick said that he would come here soon, so she needs to gain even more trust from Irian. The little heir blushed when the doctor added that their relationship was as strong as family ties. His ears and cheeks turned even redder when he asked the doctor if things would stay like this in the future. She, feeding her friend strawberries, replied that, of course, that would be the case. The boy happily ate her treat. Sitting back down at the table, the protagonist thought that at moments like these, she felt like Irian's protege. Chewing on a berry, the heir admitted, offended, that he too wanted to grow older and smarter. These words greatly pleased the girl. He then sheepishly promised his friend that even though he wasn't 19, he would still act as if he were. Looking at Irian, Richie thought that even though she hadn't liked children before, she found him quite cute. The healer advised him to eat well, exercise regularly, and go to bed on time. She also advised him to have someone more experienced than her, and she advised him to exercise. He said he didn't need anyone. But the girl countered that the nights would help him become stronger. The young man was upset by Richie's advice to hire a tutor to sharpen his thinking. He sadly said that he had more fun studying with her, but the young lady cheerfully replied that he could read books and have lunch with her. He agreed. 2 days passed, and the Viscount, while his things were being loaded into the carriage, told the Duchess, her son, and his assistant that he would definitely return in 3 months. Isabella smiled at him, asked him to take care of himself, and said that she hoped that this time he would find his daughter. The woman then laughed and added that Richie would be with them. Irian, hugging his friend, wished the doctor a safe journey. Art grinned and thought that if these two hadn't changed their minds about his assistant, they would never have let him go. The main character, with a gentle smile, also wished the mentor a good journey and asked him to be careful on the road. He, outraged that the girl was already saying goodbye to him, said that she actually needed to walk him to the port. The man added that this was because she was his assistant, just like Dill, so they would go with him and at the same time buy the things necessary for the laboratory. The pink-haired man smiled and told the girl that it seemed like the gentleman wanted to give her a gift, so he asked her to quickly follow them to the carriage. The doctor explained that the three of them would go shopping together since he didn't trust his subordinate because he would definitely buy the wrong thing. Turning to her friend, the doctor said goodbye and said they would see each other soon. Irian agreed and told her to be careful. The young lady stepped towards the exit, but her friend stared after her, as if not wanting to let her go. Thinking about something, the boy suddenly called out loudly to his friend to tell her something. The protagonist turned cheerfully, looked at him, and asked what was the matter. Unexpectedly, the heir said he believed in her. The doctor didn't immediately understand what this meant. After some time, the carriage with the ducal doctors arrived in the sunny city, namely at the market, where there were a small number of people. Looking at the cityscape, the main character thinks that this is the first time she has gone anywhere since she found herself in the Duke's palace. But she is very amused by the mere thought that she is going shopping to buy laboratory equipment. But then the Viscount coughed pointedly, thus asking for attention. When the lady did so, he inquired about her dress. She cheerfully explained that this outfit was one of the ones Isabella had given her, and that she had even given her this chic hair clip. But the man said the dress was awful, as it had no embellishment at all. The assistant sadly admitted that she had chosen the design herself, after which the doctor said that, if you look closely, it was neat, but the clip was too flashy. The young lady asked shyly if he really thought so, because she thought she was the most beautiful. Art suddenly changed his mind and stated that, on the other hand, colorful jewelry goes well with subdued clothing. The doctor's carriage continued to drive along the city streets, but suddenly Richie, looking out the window, noticed several knights on the road who were detaining someone. Dill, who also noticed this, assumed that they had detained a vagabond who seemed to be using forbidden magic. The young doctor was intrigued by this, and the boy explained that such people are not afraid to resort to magic and experiments without permission. He added that such magic always has a side effect. When the girl asked what would happen to the homeless man, the young man said they could find out in court. The orphan became agitated and began to sweat when the pink-haired man said that, depending on the severity of the crime, they could hand down the death sentence. The main character understands that this is true for forbidden magic, as well as forbidden medical experiments. Continuing to stare out the window, she reflected on how she hadn't known magic was used for anything other than healing. She couldn't understand why wanderers like this detainee would need it. Suddenly, Richie saw something so amazing outside the window that she immediately moved closer to the glass to get a better look. She realized that the one the knights had detained was the same old woman who had returned her to the past. On the day they talked in the dungeon, the protagonist did not try to hide her identity, as she thought that she would die anyway and it would not matter. Suddenly, Richie thought that she had never heard of magic that could turn back time, and that the old woman had probably used forbidden magic on her. Continuing to watch the mysterious sorceress, she thinks that she needs to find out what really happened. However, when the little girl wanted to look at the old woman again, she discovered that she, along with the knights, had disappeared without a trace. Leaning sadly against the window, she recalls the words of Dill, who said that forbidden magic always has a side effect. She assumed that in her case, too, there probably was. But what kind was unknown? The doctor couldn't think of anything else, as she was overcome with sleep. The main character is immersed in her vision, where she, as her adult self, addresses Lord Irian with a bit of embarrassment. She confesses to the man that she enjoyed spending time with him as a child, thinking about nothing, and that's all she wanted to say. However, the girl doesn't understand why she felt so embarrassed saying it. The Duke, looking romantically into his friend's eyes, first asked if it was true, and then agreed with her. Suddenly, he placed a strawberry in the lady's palm and asked her to feed him. A confused Richie asked the gentleman to repeat his question. He reminded her that she had always fed him. The doctor sheepishly replied that she had only done so when he was a child. Bringing Richie's hand with the strawberry to his lips, Arian reminded him that she had told him she loved the time they had together as children. The young man passionately bit into a piece of berry, adding that they always held hands. After eating the strawberry, the Duke smiled and asked his friend, calling her his very smart Richie, not to say that she had already forgotten about it. Suddenly, the real Richie's eyes widen in bewilderment as a man persistently calls out to her. Still in the carriage, which had already stopped, she saw Dill next to her, who informed her that they had arrived at their destination. She asked him again, surprised, and the guy repeated that they had come to a lab equipment store. The lady understood and scratched her head in embarrassment. She thanked her assistant for helping her out of the carriage and, blushing like a tomato, wondered how she had managed to fall asleep at all. As she walks to the store, Richie realizes that this has been happening to her more and more often lately, and every time she wakes up, she can't remember her dream. Meanwhile, at the training grounds of Duke Sirius's knights, the soldiers were practicing their sword skills. Joaquin Liam Kishington, captain of the Knights of Sirius, asked his lord in surprise what had brought him here. Irian, holding a wooden sword, replied that he wanted to learn fencing. The old man was so surprised to hear this that he asked him again. Joaquin sighed, remembering that before, when the child was younger, he would come to him and bring a toy sword to play with, but now everything was different. The captain reminded the boy that he had said that if you learn fencing, you can get hurt and it is difficult, so he quit training, but he said that he had changed his mind. Also, remembering his girlfriend, he resolutely said that he wanted to become tall and healthy, so he needed to exercise. The man agreed with the young gentleman and said that if he said so, he would support him and choose a good teacher for him. Grandfather called out to a certain red-haired guy named Jikel, who was practicing swordsmanship nearby. The young man, wiping the sweat that was streaming down his face, responded. Upon seeing the young gentleman, the knight greeted him and introduced himself as Jigal Kais. The captain said he was the best knight training the new recruits. However, Joaquin secretly told the boy that this guy had a bit of a difficult approach to learning due to his nasty personality. Irian stated that it was not a problem, and since he arrived later than the others, he would try even harder. Jigal and the captain looked at the milord with enthusiasm, as if they had long wanted to hear these words from him. Soon the knight began to conduct his first lesson with the young heir, while the old man watched them from the side. Watching the boy learn to wield a sword, Joaquin thought that he looked very much like the previous duke. The man believes that he has an excellent character, but he is not sure whether he will have any outstanding abilities like previous generations. Although even when this young man is in pain, he remains silent. Stopping to rest, Irian thought that his sword was just heavy, but he hated being treated like a child. He remembered Richie and decided he had to try harder for her. At that moment, the girl was looking at test tubes in the laboratory supply store. But suddenly she sneezed. Ark asked his assistant if she had a cold, but she said no. The lady thought someone was remembering her. Dell, while making a list of what needed to be bought for the lab, asked the doctors if they needed to take test tubes. At first, the girl said that all sizes of test tubes were needed, and then the Viscount said that yes, all sizes might be needed. Then the guy asked about syringes, and the doctor replied that the ones from the Beria district are the most hygienic, after which the doctor said the same thing. The pink-haired boy laughed at the fact that two brown-haired men were telling him the same thing, then admitted that it felt like he was on a family shopping spree. Hearing this, Richie and Ark both declared that their hair color was the most common, which surprised the guy because they even quarreled for the same reason. A few hours later, two doctors and their attendant arrived at the pier, where a passenger ship was already preparing to sail. Dill said that they would soon buy everything they needed and there was still plenty of time before departure, but the Viscount objected that this was because they had made a list. The main character then approached the man and thanked him for the lab, the props, and for planning everything for her. She also promised to show him some good research results soon. She then added that she hoped that this time he would be able to find his daughter and would not need a paternity test. The man smiled, very pleased by his assistant's support, but suddenly he hesitated when he wanted to ask her something. Still, with a blush appearing on his face, the man asked the girl if she liked his gift more than Isabella's dresses. Dill suggested to the little girl that his mentor meant whether she liked his purchases for the laboratory more than the Duchess's gift. Then, the gentleman himself said that his surprise was much better than dresses and cakes, to which she sheepishly agreed. The doctor let out a malicious laugh and declared that only a doctor could understand another doctor. The boy asked Richie to simply agree with what he said. The heroine, still not understanding what was happening, thanked her mentor once again. Soon, Richie and the servant said goodbye to the Viscount, after which the latter boarded the ship and left. When evening came, the protagonist was already getting ready to go to bed, thinking about what a strange farewell to Ark had been. But then there was a knock on her room door. A maid entered the room and informed her mistress that Irian was experiencing severe muscle pain. This alarmed the girl and left her slightly upset. But when she heard that the boy was feeling unwell because he was taking fencing lessons, she cried out in displeasure. When the lady came to the heir, he told her that she herself had said he couldn't just run. She agreed but meant to take up fencing when he grew up. These words made the gentleman a little angry, and he objected that he was not small at all. And, besides, Jaquel, his teacher, had praised him. Irian also added that the knight said that he had excellent posture and would learn quickly, but the boy himself was not sure whether to believe it. Richie asked why not, and he replied that Vederick called him weak and slow, and the others praised him only because he was a young duke. The girl stated that this was not the case at all, and that his motor nerves were very good. For example, she asked a friend to remember how they played tennis together. The lady admits that she tried very hard, but in the end lost. He sighed and blushed, and then said that if she said so, he would believe her. The healer said that this was very good, and that now he needed to go to bed, and she would stay nearby until he fell asleep. She told her friend that she had had a good time today. She had gone out into the city for the first time in a long time, and then she had dined with her tutor, her servant, and her coachman. The lady asked Irian why he was smiling, and he said it was just because. He then asked her to have dinner with him tomorrow, just the two of them. She thought about it and asked if he had training tomorrow. When the heir replied that he did, and early in the morning, Richie advised him to go to bed early. The young man looked at his friend sadly. Looking thoughtfully at the ceiling, he admitted that sometimes he wakes up and thinks that he is about to die. The unfortunate man said that in the past he was getting worse and worse every day, and that he also couldn't stand the dark. However, the young Duke said that when Richie was with him to watch over him at night, he didn't mind the darkness at all. The main character smiled tenderly at him and promised that she would protect him from things even scarier than the dark. The boy grinned and blushed. He too promised his friend that he would become strong enough to protect her. Leaving the office, the doctor thought that if Irian protected her by growing up healthy, then the rebellion would not take place, which meant she would not be detained and killed. But suddenly she noticed that a strange alarm sound was coming from her room, the door of which was slightly open. But when the protagonist saw the red light coming from the room, which was coming from the emergency warning light, she immediately realized that the problem was with the lady. The girl ran with all her might towards Isabella's chambers, wondering when the alarm in her room had started ringing. She sped up her run so much that she began to sweat profusely. The only thing that scared her was the thought of not making it in time. The lady remembers that in her past life, the Duchess died only after 6 years, but if she is late, it could happen much faster. Almost reaching the woman's bedroom, she heard her desperate coughing. This made the doctor realize she wasn't late and still had time. Without any ceremony, the main character burst into the room and loudly and anxiously called out to Her Highness. Isabella, who had been coughing blood into her handkerchief, turned her head excitedly towards the assistant who had arrived. It was impossible to describe the horror that Richie felt when she saw blood on the Duchess's handkerchief. When the confused doctor approached Miss and hesitantly said that she had just seen blood on her handkerchief, she quickly hid the evidence behind her back. The girl became concerned, as this symptom wasn't in the woman's medical record. She asked if she had been coughing up blood. She didn't answer, and the heroine directly asked the ruler whether she had been hiding her illness all this time. Desperately grasping the lady by the edge of her sleeve, Isabella asked her not to tell the Viscount about this. When the unfortunate woman calmed down a little and sat down on the bed, Richie asked why she didn't tell anyone about this, because if she concealed her illness, the doctors might write the wrong prescription. She said that she was aware of this, but there was one but. Ark left his position as chief physician 7 years ago. The Duchess says that when her husband started vomiting blood, he said it was very bad. She asked him to find a new doctor before leaving. But Ark told her that he could not stay any longer because he had to find his daughter. Her Highness said that they had changed the chief physician, but when she wanted to tell what happened in the end, she sadly fell silent. The main character also lowered her dull gaze to the floor because she understands that after the Duke's death, her mentor returned to work. Isabella says that she understands Ark's problems, but she still needs him. But if the doctor finds out about her illness, she will definitely quit again. Gathering all her strength, she told the lady that if her son could live a healthy and happy life, it did not matter if she died early. The healer remained silent, and the Duchess continued to say that the Viscount had saved Irian many times, and she would be pleased if he continued to grow in peace. Then the lady inquired about what had just happened. She asked the little girl if she would tell anyone about her coughing up blood. She resolutely replied that she did not, and for this, the woman thanked the young medical genius. Taking a deep breath, the main character admitted that she was very lucky to find out about everything today. After this, she promised Isabella to change the order in her prescription, but warned that it would be difficult to prescribe the correct medicine now, since she did not yet understand the cause of the coughing up blood. Taking the ruler's bloody handkerchief for herself, the girl said that she would take it for research. Miss Sirius smiled kindly at the young doctor, thanked her, and said that she was glad she was there, but asked her to keep everything a secret. Richie said that she should be thanking her for letting her use the lab, and that she even built a herb greenhouse for her. She asked if the Viscount had made a better laboratory for her than his own, to which the doctor said that he had, and that today he had bought her various equipment. The Duchess stated that Ark was all about money, so it was easy for him to throw it away, but the protagonist was confused by this because she also showered her with gifts. Still, the little girl told the woman that in the future, she should definitely tell her about her symptoms. She added that she would always be by the Duchess's side and asked her to let her know if the symptoms reappeared. The Duchess, astonished, asked if she was being honest. The heroine laughed and said that she was an orphan and had nowhere to go anyway, but she thought to herself that she would be with them until Irian grew up. Isabella looked warmly into the child's eyes and smiled, after which she thanked her for her help. It was only dawn in the duchy, but Irian was already on his feet. He had been diligently training to wield a sword with his teacher. Before the next training fight, Jikel warned the kid that he would now be hitting from the left. He understood and was about to fight back, but suddenly the man swung his sword not to the left, as he had promised, but to the right. The boy was startled by this unexpectedness but dodged in time and was unharmed. The young man told the teacher that he had done very badly, but the teacher said that life is full of surprises and one must be prepared for everything. He advises the young gentleman not to believe everything that others tell him, because the world is full of liars. But the student said his friend Richie never lies. The man countered that it was because she was a doctor, and doctors can't lie to be trusted. Then Jekyll told the boy that one day he too would have to lie, and he would also rule the lands, so he needed to learn to hide his emotions. He advised the child to lie, as he had done, if he really wanted something. These words confused and intrigued the child. Irian said that he didn't want to lie, but the teacher said that in the future he would change his mind when he really wanted something. The heir began to think about it and decided that the only thing he wanted was to be with Richie. He finally said he understood everything and prepared to begin the next training fight. The young man also prepared his sword, but suddenly the boy asked him to start his studies a little later, starting from the next day. When he asked why he was asking for such a thing, the little Duke replied that it was because Uncle Roman and Vederick would probably arrive tomorrow. Jekyll scratched his head thoughtfully and agreed to his condition, saying that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Taking advantage of the fact that his enemy was distracted and lost in his thoughts, Irian quickly pointed his sword at him, causing him to almost move his horses. Then the heir, without removing the sword from the stunned boy's throat, smiled sweetly and asked if he was catching on quickly. The teacher realized that he had been beaten and raised his hands, surprised that before he could even blink, the man had lied and taken advantage of it, even though he had just said that he did not want to lie. At this time, the main character, being in her new laboratory, is looking at some papers, while Dill is laying out her things around the room. Passing by the girl, the guy thinks that the research room has just been completed, and she is already working hard, even asking him to leave quickly. Richie, reading a certain document, thinks that the current physical condition of the lady is unlikely to be the reason for coughing up blood, which means that something is wrong. But then she noticed something strange. In the petri dish in which she had combined the silica plant and Isabella's blood, a reaction had occurred. The girl looked at the result of the experiment with bewilderment, remembering that this herb is often used to neutralize the multi-flowered fallopia. The protagonist quickly realized that it was all about poison. The Duchess did not have an ordinary illness, but someone was deliberately poisoning her. She reasons that the poison of the hippie flower usually causes headaches and stomach pain. Often people do not realize that they have mild poisoning, and that it is likely that some criminal is slowly and secretly killing the Duke's wife. The healer guesses that if this has become a threat to Isabella's life, it means that the Duchess has been using poison for a long time, at least once every 2 months. Suddenly, the young lady noticed some changes in her petri dish again. The concentration of poison had decreased. After observing the reaction, the girl determined that the perpetrator was using a new type of poison. She's not sure who it might be, but he's not one of her close associates. If you think about it logically, the people who benefit most from the Duchess's death are Baron Isidor and Vederick. Richie thought detoxification would be enough, but if the lady declared her suspicions of her younger brother, she would lose all his trust. The lady decided to find compelling evidence to prevent the Baron from defending himself. At this time, the heir's mother is having lunch with a certain white-bearded man who asks her how she has been doing lately, calling her his sister. She modestly replied that it was wonderful, and the man laughed and said that she was always so cold and taciturn in this regard. This is Baron Roman Jacques Isidor. When his sister asked him where Vederick was, he replied that he was playing with Irian, then asked Isabella if she was okay. The lady replied that she couldn't say she was doing well, but she was getting used to it. He sighed upon hearing her words. Her brother asked Isabella if she had told Viscount Farrelman about all the symptoms of her illness, and she said no. The man praised her and added that if the doctor left, things would be tough for her. With an incomprehensible smile, the gentleman said that she needed to protect her son too. Roman, seeing that the drink in his sister's cup was different from what he had, asked what she was drinking. She, lifting the cup towards herself, said that it was a gift for her, but he could not try it because it was only for women. The lady said that it had been given to her by the Viscount's assistant, and the Baron asked in surprise if this was the girl they were talking about, and who had not yet been kicked out. The Duchess smiled and said that this was exactly the case, and that the girl was very smart. The woman remembered how Richie had recently come to her and handed her a bag of herbs, saying that it was her new medicine that needed to be taken regularly. Handing Isabella her gift, the doctor also asked her to tell others that it was tea, and whoever asked her for it, not to give it to anyone. The heroine says that if some annoying guest doesn't stop asking questions about this tea, then you just need to say that this drink is for women. Her Highness remembered one more thing. The doctor had told her that if anyone found out what kind of medicine it was, then everyone would quickly understand what her illness was. Meanwhile, the The man tells his sister that she has taken a liking to the Viscount's new assistant, and that he wants to meet her once. The gentleman asked the mistress if she would mind if he invited Richie to his place for dinner, but she first asked if he wanted to do it today. Isabella remembers a girl who asked if she could have dinner with her today and tomorrow to see if her medicine had worked on her. As a result, she tells her brother that he won't be able to because she already has a meeting with her. This confused him, but he did not stop and asked if he could organize dinner with her tomorrow, and the sister replied that tomorrow would not work either. The Baron became indignant and reminded his mistress that he had only come to see her for 3 days. Noticing his persistence, the Duchess asked Roman if he wanted to tell her something, and if so, let him do it now. He immediately fell silent, but surprisingly, he clenched his teeth in anger. Vederick asks Irian why he took up fencing when he told him not to. He asks if he cares about his words. The heir calmly replied that thanks to these activities he felt much better than before, so there was nothing to worry about. The Baron's son asked his friend to stop drinking so much, otherwise he might get fat, but he said that he would not stop because he exercised a lot. When the little Duke said that Richie had given him all this advice, the young man asked if he was talking about Dr. Farrellman's new assistant. He remembers being fooled by her appearance and believing she was a noblewoman. The antagonist decides he needs to find out what this girl is up to. When Vederick told his friend that he wanted to meet his doctor, the latter immediately said indignantly that he couldn't. He asked in surprise why, and the young Duke answered briefly and clearly. It was because he was 17 years old. The young man did not understand what was so frightening about this, so he asked the boy about it. Irian repeated that it was unacceptable for him to meet his beloved girlfriend. Coming closer to the heir, the Viscount told his friend that he must obey him, so he needed to be a good brother and arrange a meeting for them. The young Duke was very indignant when the guy said that he was his cousin and friend, but for some reason he did not allow him to meet his cutie. However, the future ruler stated that even so, he was against his meeting with her. He explained that Richie was the Viscount's assistant, but he had signed an agreement with the family and therefore she was now his, and he had the right to refuse him a meeting with her. The antagonist was surprised by how aggressive he was when he reminded his brother that they were actually related, but he said that no, because he was not serious. But then a plan of his own popped into the boy's head, causing a creepy smile to appear on his face. He asks the boy if he wants to impress her. Leaning against his relative's chair, the young man said with a suspicious grin that if that was the case, then he should lose some excess fat. He also said that becoming an adult doesn't mean becoming fat since he's bigger than him. The heir, surprised, asked if that was true. The provocateur then asked his friend what he would do if his girlfriend became disillusioned with him and left. He was so frightened when he heard this that his expression immediately changed. All his self-confidence was gone. He didn't understand what his brother was trying to convey to him. Suddenly, Vederick declares that how could he say that the girl is his assistant? Of course, she is being cunning to please him, but he is objective and can give him advice. The manipulator tells Arian to just eat the apples he gave him instead of food, and he will look cooler if he listens to him. The boy lowered his head sadly, horror evident in his gaze. He timidly agreed with him. He praised him, calling him a good fellow, but putting his finger to his lips reminded him that it was their secret. Some time later, the main character and the Duchess were dining with Irian at the same table, which was filled with various delicious dishes. The woman asked the young doctor if she liked the lunch, to which she said yes, very much so. The lady thanked the mistress for fulfilling her request, which was to temporarily exclude seafood from her diet. Richie thinks hippie flowers taste like fish, so they can be added to seafood. She created a menu for the family if they go somewhere. Her Highness noticed that her son was not eating anything at all, and very worried about him, asked if he had an appetite. The boy, excitedly putting the cutlery on the table, apologized to his mother and friend and said that he could not eat. The protagonist was in complete shock, and the mother calmly asked the child what was wrong with him, and if he was in any pain. He swallowed nervously and broke out in sweat, and replied that no, and that wasn't the issue. The girl suddenly felt uneasy, and began to think about what had suddenly happened to him. Looking at her embarrassed friend, she thinks that he played Vederick in the evening, and perhaps he told him some nonsense again. Richie sighed deeply, realizing she'd have to inspire her friend again. She was a little frustrated by her inability to find common ground with the ducal family. Night has fallen and Dill, in the greenhouse watering the plants, is thinking about how a young lady can command a specialist like him. Earlier, Richie had asked him if the Viscount had sent him to deal with the lab and greenhouse instead of being friends. He replied that everything was so, after which the girl asked if he was her servant, to which the guy said that, in fact, they were both commoners. The healer asked him smilingly whether they should be friends and whether he could follow her, his friend's, orders. Dill frankly admitted that he could, but she suddenly asked how she could be familiar with a person who was 5 years older than her. But the next moment she answered her own question. Of course she could. The guy laughed at how quickly his friend adapted. When the little girl asked her subordinate to plant cypress in his greenhouse, the pink-haired man asked her again with interest. Dill objected that these seeds were difficult to obtain, but she said it was very easy to do in the Arca trade union. The young man agreed with her. The doctor added that the cypress is very fragrant, and if you take care of it, it will smell even stronger, but asked that her request be kept secret. Having taken out some kind of toy bunny, she also asked her friend to hang this toy on the key to the greenhouse and then leave it on the table in her room, after which she would not lock the room for a while. The girl gave the artifact to the boy, asking him to immediately inform her if the key was lost, but he asked in bewilderment what all this was for. The main character smiled sincerely and said that he would find out about everything later. Having replayed this whole situation in his head, Dill wondered in his mind, what was the Viscount's assistant thinking about? But he thinks that it doesn't look like she's doing anything useless, and at first he'll just follow the order and see what happens. The young man grinned briefly and wondered if it was strange that a certain anticipation had appeared in him. When night fell, the protagonist, coming into Irian's bedroom, asked him what he had talked about with Vederick today. He didn't answer right away, but hesitated a bit. The lady asked if it was so difficult for him to answer, and the boy admitted it was a man's secret. She asked if he was that close to her, and the Duke replied that he was actually his cousin and only friend. Richie asked if she could meet him, saying that she also wanted to play with them, but her friend sternly said that he was against it. The young Duke admitted it was because he'd called her cutie. The healer asked what it was about the guy having taste, and he added that she liked older people. The doctor said that she simply didn't like children. And the boy, folding his arms across his chest in displeasure, declared that he was still against it. He assumes that she has become close to Dill and is now thinking of meeting Vederick as well. Because of this, he called his friend a man, which in children's parlance is the female version of a womanizer. This greatly disconcerted the girl. The boy sighed and said that they say it's hard to be with someone who's into men. Surprised, Richie asked him who'd taught him that. He replied that Jekyll had helped him with this. The main character immediately guessed that this was his fencing teacher, who had a difficult character. But the heir, smiling tenderly, said that it was not scary, and if she was next to him, then it did not matter what her passions were. Extending his hand to his friend, Irian said it was time for him to sleep. The healer thought that now she should give him her hand, as if nothing had happened. She placed her hand on top of the boy's in a friendly manner, which made him very happy. But suddenly she asked her friend who was more important to him, Vederick or her. Then she rephrased her question, asking whom he trusted more. The heir was confused and fell silent, and the Viscount's assistant said she had decided to be his only one. She asked if he had forgotten her promise that she would always take care of him. The boy smirked and replied that he trusted her because she told him that she would never lie. Then Richie said that in that case, someone he trusted should be next to him. The lady stated that although Vederick was his cousin, he was also the Baron's adopted son, and he was the owner of this palace, and only his decisions were the most important here. The main character insistently explained that all his desires and thoughts are law, and he does not need to listen to those who say otherwise. Irian said with a smile that Jekyll had told him the same thing, and she said that of course, since he was a young duke. Finally, the boy told his friend that he understood and would remember her words. The doctor smiled and told him it was time to sleep until morning. He agreed and wished her good night. The little girl wished him the same. Suddenly, the heroine finds herself at a reception attended by wealthy ladies and gentlemen. Everyone was rejoicing, dancing, and celebrating. She doesn't understand what she, a commoner, is doing at this celebration, and how she ended up here in the first place. The girl also has no idea why she is wearing such a stunning dress and why her appearance is so different from that of a 13-year-old girl. Richie walked past the dance floor and came to the balcony, where a familiar man was already waiting for her. Adult Irian told the lady that she was late, and then asked if she had a good time dancing with the poor crown prince. Holding his girlfriend tightly to himself, the man asked if this predatory wolf cub held her by the waist while they danced. He leaned closer to her ear and whispered to her where else they had touched each other. Moving away a little, he told the blushing lady that although she had been famous from an early age, he did not expect that she would hunt for the crown prince. The Duke told his friend with a smile that it didn't matter how wicked she was as long as she continued to be with him. He hugged the doctor and reminded her that the most important thing was that she listened to him. Suddenly, Richie noticed a sound coming from behind them and wondered why the room had become so noisy and if something had happened. At this point, the main character's sleep is interrupted, and she wakes up from someone persistently and incessantly calling her. But she instantly perked up when she realized that a familiar male voice was shouting at her that if she was already awake, then she should quickly open her door. Coming out into the corridor, the healer saw Dill. She asked him what had happened. He said with horror on his face that, as she had said, the key to the greenhouse had disappeared. The doctor immediately said with a smile that they needed to go there as quickly as possible, and she needed to hurry and get dressed. But suddenly, Eddie stopped and remembered that she had actually been having some kind of nightmare, although she didn't feel anything bad, so she didn't care. Walking through the greenhouse, the protagonist praised the boy for how quickly the plants grew and how talented he was. He said he was trying his best. She laughed and jokingly said that it seemed like her slave had become proud, which greatly embarrassed him. When the girl said that he was good at following the genius's orders, so he needed to be more confident, Dill laughed and thought that he should discuss this with the Viscount. Then the lady spoke about the next request he had to fulfill for her was to hide among the sacks and wait for the criminal to come. The young man asked if he really needed to hide there, and she said yes, because criminals always return to the scene of the crime. The doctor said the thief would return at dusk, when the scent of the caperch had dissipated. She said she would give Dill a ring for communication. Having given this ring to her friend, she tells him to keep an eye on everything here, and if someone appears, then immediately call her, and she will come running and catch the criminal alive. Sometime later, the main character, Her Highness and her son, were walking together in the ducal garden. The woman said she hadn't been on a walk in a while, so she felt great afterward. The girl said she was lucky. The trio continued walking, but the doctor still did not understand why she was standing between them and walking hand in hand with everyone. Isabella asked her son if he was sad that Vederick had left, to which he said no, and they agreed to go for a ride together in the evening. The mother asked if they were going to ride horses, and the boy happily said yes, and Jikel taught him how to ride a horse. The lady, not believing the child the first time, asked him again if he really knew how to ride a horse. The young man said he was doing well and would try to win today. Richie was pleased and said he had a great attitude. Judging by Her Highness's expression, her son's good mood pleased her as well. She smiled and acknowledged his excellent spirits. The doctor sighed and said, disappointed, that she would have liked to see this, and Irian admitted that he had not told her about this before because he was not confident in his victory. But she promised that even if she didn't watch, she would root for him, and in general she would always, time after time, support only him. The heir was embarrassed, which was noticeable by the blush on his cheeks, and said that he liked it, and even asked her to root for him. The doctor decided to take her friend's hand to support him even more, but at that moment, a signal suddenly appeared on her ring in the form of a bright light. The lady immediately realized that this was a call from Dill, who had probably been waiting for her in the greenhouse and had caught the criminal's arrival. She told the Duchess that she had recently taken up growing Kipercha and invited her to come with her to the greenhouse and see, to which she agreed. But when the trio got closer to the room, they noticed that the door was open, but the protagonist says that she is sure that she locked the door. Bursting into the greenhouse abruptly and unexpectedly, Richie loudly asked the man who had entered who he was. Before her eyes, the girl saw a certain servant, who was so frightened by her sudden appearance that she dropped the fruit that she herself had picked. The Duchess and Irian entered the room not fully understanding what was happening. The healer asked the maid if she was stealing her Kipercha fruits. The girl burst into sweat and started shaking, saying that everything was wrong and she didn't want this. The protagonist smiled because she had managed to obtain evidence that Baron Isidore would not be able to refute. The little girl declared that the scent of this plant itself was unique, making it difficult to steal outside of twilight. Listen, worried, said she simply wanted to taste the fruit. But the doctor objected that Kiperchi is not famous for its taste, and in general this fruit is not so easy to eat. Then the maid said that, supposedly, it was Dill who actually asked her to do this, but the guy who had been hiding in the bags all this time said that it was not so. Having emerged from his hiding place and straightened his clothes, he declared that this had never happened, and that the girl was brazenly lying to everyone. It dawned on the criminal that the pink-haired man had been there from the very beginning. She asked him in a trembling voice how long he had been around. The main character smiled smugly and told the thief that her friend said that he didn't ask her for anything. The doctor calmly explained to the offender that if she regularly consumed the hippie flower, she could experience vomiting, headaches, and stomach pain. She also says that when the palace stopped serving seafood, they were unable to use the flower anywhere else because of its smell. The lady believes that the greenhouse has produced Kipercha fruits which can be used to get rid of this aroma, so they gave in to their greed. The lady asked if she was right, but the maid, trembling all over, asked her to forgive her and said that she knew nothing, but was only following orders. A puzzled Irian asked his friend what was going on, and she said that she wanted to investigate something, so she gave Dill a ring for communication. The Duchess's tone immediately changed to one of extreme hostility. She sternly asked Dill to summon Sir Joaquin here immediately. He obeyed. The mistress's gaze was filled with anger as she said that she had a personal question for this gentleman. Realizing the full horror and the fact that she had just exposed herself in front of Her Highness, the criminal lost the feeling in her legs and fell to the floor in shock. The next moment, Isabella's anger seemed to vanish, and she hugged the Viscount's assistant with a tender smile and thanked her for everything. The girl didn't answer her, but simply hugged her back, but she thought that it would be good if they caught the real criminal. Sometime later, as Richie was quietly reading a book in her room, Dill came to her and told her that as soon as the maid had been tortured, she had bitten off her tongue and died. She was surprised, but not greatly. The little girl slammed the book shut in displeasure because she was angry that they couldn't find out anything just like that. The guy says that the servant was hired 4 years ago, but the information about her identity and background is false, and the person who recommended her has already left the palace. The pink-haired man said that it was the Viscount's assistant at the time, and Richie realized that such people could not stay here for more than 10 days. She understands that this is an excellent opportunity to sneak someone into someone else's palace without suspicion, and her presence here will hinder their plans. But the lady still believes that even if this is the case, it turns out that she herself will be in danger. Dill told his friend that she had done a great job today, but she said that it was nothing, and that it was enough to just be as smart as she was. The doctor also praised the boy, saying that thanks to him they had sorted everything out easily. The young man was very pleased with these words. He admitted that if she had other orders, she could mention them anytime. The heroine, however, became convinced that he had the temperament of a slave. The pink-haired man decided to say that Mr. Irian was also delighted with her, although he didn't know all the details of what happened. At the moment, Richie caught the criminal red-handed. The boy watched her with shining eyes as if deeply admiring her. Dill thinks he thought his friend was simply stunning. The protagonist responded in such a spirit that it was self-evident, and she thought so too. Dill scratched his head awkwardly and admitted that he himself knew little, but asked the girl if she had found out anything. She replied that yes, and it was a medical matter, so ordinary people wouldn't notice. The young man asked if she would explain it to Baron Isidor. The heroine stood up from her chair in bewilderment and shock, and asked why he was saying that, and whether this man was a doctor. The guy replied that no, but he had extensive medical knowledge. This greatly surprised the young lady. For reference, the Viscount's subordinate said that it was this man who helped Art's daughter come into this world. He adds that he heard that the Viscountess suddenly went into labor on Baron Isidor's territory, and therefore the Viscount knew nothing about his daughter. According to the guy, the young father was told when his daughter was born that she had blonde hair and green eyes, so he is looking for 13-year-old girls like her. The doctor reflected on the fact that she didn't know the Viscount's history, but if the Baron really did have such knowledge, then all the pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. She finds it no surprise that this vile man used hippie poison. Baron Isidor is much more cunning than the girl initially assumed. He has been poisoning everyone in the ducal palace for a long time. The Duchess's brother, meeting his adopted son in the corridor, informed him that their subordinate, named Milani, had been arrested. But then he says that, fortunately, she committed suicide. Vederick asks him if he knows why she was arrested. He said she was caught picking capercha fruit from the new assistant's tree, but he didn't know anything else. He didn't know whether she was arrested for theft or poisoning. The young man then asked if the Duchess had said anything to him personally, and the Baron replied that she had never been talkative. The manipulator said that in any case, Este and Kane were still in that palace. The man said that he asked these people to lie low for a while. Thoughtfully turning his gaze towards the window, Isidor added that Arian was still very young, so they still had time. But Vederick suddenly tells his father that he has changed. He no longer eats the food he gives him, after he became close to Art's new assistant. The boy said that he meant that very same girl doctor who does an excellent job and takes care of the heir much better than the Viscount. The man responded by saying that this lady needed to be kept an eye on, and then told his son that he should try to meet her in person. Ister believes that Richie is only 13 years old, but she has already attracted the attention of the doctor and Isabella, which means she is not so simple, and they will have a hard time because of her. A terrifying smile appeared on the man's face, and he said that they needed to get rid of her. Isabella, having lunch with the main character in the garden, thanked her for yesterday and said that she did not expect such a cutie as she would be useful. She then said that, fortunately, many people in the castle thought she had gotten rid of the thief, but that it would be even easier to keep the secret. The girl asked if a harsh punishment would ruin her reputation, but Richie smiled sheepishly when the Duchess replied that she had never been known for her kindness. The woman suddenly declared menacingly that from now on, those who come to the estate will behave more carefully. The little girl is worried that the person poisoning the ducal family has still not been caught. She believes it must be someone with medical experience. The lady reminds the lady that she needs to remember to get her blood tested more often, and not only hers, but Irian's too. The lady was horrified by the doctor's guess that her son, too, was probably being gradually fed poison. The little girl thought that she couldn't tell her who she suspected, but she said that it was very possible. Isabella decided to say thank you to the doctor and asked if she could promise her that she would stay in their estate and take care of Ariana. Richie said yes, and she wouldn't leave until he grew up. She asked what she was going to do after that. The girl said she didn't know. The mistress asked how about becoming the chief physician of the estate, but the heroine said that she already had a viscount. The lady said that she would fire him because, although he was a good doctor, he was only concerned with finding his daughter. Gently taking the child's hands in hers, the Duchess asked her if she would agree if she would take care of her like no one else in the empire. The doctor scratched her head awkwardly and said with a smile that she would think about her proposal. Then the woman asked her if she wanted anything, since this time she wanted to repay her. She said she didn't need anything. The lady asked again if she had any unfinished business or something she would like to receive. When the lady said this, the girl's memory immediately flashed back to that moment from her past life, where she was sitting in a dungeon before her death penalty, and the last thing she thought about was her lost parents. She nevertheless confessed to the Duchess that there was something her heart deeply desired. The woman, smiling, prepared to listen to her wish. The main character says that she would really like to find her biological parents. Isabella was surprised by this request, and the orphan said that at the orphanage, they told her that she was born on a lake located in the border area. Richie says if anyone has lost a child with brown hair and green eyes, she would like to get a blood test with that person. The Duchess promised to make an announcement throughout the empire. She believes everyone needs a family, so she allows the girl to consider her her mother. She, stunned, said that she was a commoner, while Isabella was from a great noble family. The doctor thanked her for this, but declined. Her Highness was upset by the girl's words, but she did not contradict her and accepted her decision that it was wrong. The garden of the ducal palace was as beautiful as ever. A large, tall fountain added a special elegance and magic to it. Walking through the courtyard, the young doctor thinks about how, by law, a nobleman cannot marry a commoner, let alone adopt her. The little girl smiled at the mere thought that in her past life she would never have had the chance to meet the Duchess in person. Suddenly, walking past the sports ground, she notices Videric and Arian competing in a game of tennis. The older boy threw the ball at the opponent so hard that he couldn't even hit it back. The heroine felt sorry that they couldn't hit the ball back. Judging by the manipulator's expression, he was pleased with his throw. The heir, having gone to retrieve the ball, turned around and noticed his doctor standing behind his friend. Seeing the boy looking at her, she whispered so the other boy wouldn't hear, and told him not to give up. The young Duke greatly appreciated his friend's support, and after it, he felt much better and more determined to win. He threw the ball to his opponent in such a way that he didn't have time to think about it and didn't even hit it back, which made him very angry. Vederic irritably asked Arian how he could play with him like that if he was serving against the rules. The young man said the ball allegedly hit the edge of his racket and bounced off. He asked the heir if his motor skills were even developed. He said that he had deliberately thrown it in that direction, but the provocateur continued to insist that it was a violation and accused his brother of not knowing the rules. Vederic laughed at his friend and said that this was probably the reason why the servants despised him. The main character strongly imagined that this impudent man started an argument and offended Arian. She decides to stand up for her friend and approaches him. The girl claims she saw everything and that no violations were committed. He indignantly asked her what she could possibly know about this game. The orphan tells Vederic that he should have reacted faster and reached towards the sword, so it was entirely his mistake. The young man clenched his teeth in displeasure at the fact that some doctor's assistant dared to argue with him. But then the Crown Duke decides to stand up for his friend, ordering the manipulator not to be rude to her. He even forbids him from touching her. The boy's gaze became very cold and frightening. He repeated that he would never allow him to do this. Vederic asked him in bewilderment what he was doing, but he reminded his brother that he was, in fact, the future master. The boy told his friend that he could not behave like that with his subordinate and on his territory. The protagonist was greatly impressed by Arian's behavior. She was shocked by how much he had matured and changed. The provocateur indignantly asked the child whether this commoner, about whose life he knew nothing, was more important to him than himself. Richie asked what was so strange about that, since it was obvious that she was more beautiful and charming, so it was obvious that she was more important than him. Vederic was seriously stunned by the doctor's expressions, but when she said that she was also smarter than him, he went completely berserk. Arian asked his brother not to be angry and not to misunderstand him. He was also dear to him. The boy explained that he just wanted to warn him that he needed to be polite with his girlfriend. Tom didn't like the fact that some little brat like him could warn him about something, but the young Duke said with a smile that it was time for him to go. The heir asked the doctor if she was going to her chambers and offered to show her the way. She agreed and thanked him. On the way to the palace, the young gentleman asked the heroine if she had taken off the ring that Dil had given her, and she said yes, because it was disposable. Then the jealous man asked if she'd thrown it away, but the girl, surprised, asked why she'd done that. He suggested she throw it away anyway, and she, confused, agreed. Watching the sweet interaction between the heir and his doctor, Vederick clenched his teeth in anger. Later, the Baron's son, talking to his father, can't contain his anger at the fact that he couldn't answer Irian and that he simply left. His father advises him to relax and simply trust that man. Several years ago, a certain man came to Isidore and said that if he did everything as he said, then all of his sister's property would go to him. Leaving the ducal palace in a carriage, Isabella's brother regrets that he himself did not witness the end of the Viscount's daughter, as that man told him. At this time, the Viscount is already disembarking from the ship that has arrived in the Duchy of Sirius. On the shore, he is met by Dil, who says he did a good job. The man smiled at him sweetly, said hello, and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. But there is no smile on the boy's face. He sees that the mentor has returned from his journey alone this time too, which means he has failed to find his daughter again. Then the boy noticed the large number of suitcases Ferelman had brought with him. The doctor asked him to load them all into the carriage. He said that there were dresses, shoes, and jewelry worn by the noblewomen of Irbia, laboratory equipment, rare herbs, and medical books. He smiled and said that he had brought a lot, after which he asked if he had bought all these things for Richie. The doctor replied that no one else would need it, and Dil laughed and said that he could have honestly admitted that he remembered her and bought all this. Ark countered that then she might think he was rushing her into a paternity test, and he didn't want to put too much pressure on her. The subordinate was very embarrassed because, although the mentor had ordered him to take all the suitcases to the carriage, he was still amazed by the quantity. But then the doctor seriously asked him whether the Duchess had bought anything for his assistant during his absence. He thought for a moment and said that Richie didn't want anything but asked the lady for one favor. The Viscount, intimidatingly approaching the boy, menacingly asked what kind of service this was, and the subordinate replied that she wanted to find her parents. The man was confused by this, and the young man added that there were people who took a blood test, but it turned out that they were not her parents. But Dil encouraged his mentor by saying that since his assistant had decided to start searching for the family, she had not abandoned her research. The heroine, working in her room, considered the situation insane because she had already checked everything but still could not find the reason why Irian got better, but he still had seizures and dizziness. The girl understands that she needs to somehow find out the cause of the disease and cure it. But she thought that, fortunately, the Baron hadn't done anything suspicious in recent days. The lady found all this too tiresome. The doctor's wife suggested that if she asked the lady about the Baron, she would say that he did not have enough intelligence and talent to come up with such a good plan. A question arose in the little lady's mind. Is there someone else behind him? And if so, then things are really bad. Suddenly, Dil walks into her office and calls out to her. She asks him what happened. He informed her that the Duke's chief physician had returned, and the girl said smilingly that she would come to him soon. Leaving the room to see the visiting Viscount, the main character unexpectedly meets her friend. However, Irian, noticing that Dil, who had recently worn her ring, was walking next to Richie, suddenly became wary and frowned. But he stopped paying attention and asked his friend where she was going. She replied that she wanted to greet the mentor upon his return. The boy was upset to hear this, because he had wanted to ask her to read him a book. He asked if she would come back because he couldn't sleep without her. The protagonist replied that he just thought so and that he would be able to fall asleep without her, but he still continued asking her to come to him. Unfortunately, the young lady could not talk to him for long and soon said goodbye and left, and Irian, irritably looking after Dil, who went with her, said that they would see each other again. The doctor smiled because she thought that the young heir was just like a little child. Arriving at the head doctor's office, the girl greeted the chief doctor cheerfully. He greeted her back with a smile. Ark said that she had come at the right time. Pointing his finger at the dresses, he said that he had accumulated a lot of unnecessary things, but she could take them for herself. The heroine was very surprised by the beauty and cuteness of the dresses. She asked why there were so many of them, and why they were all summer, to which he replied that it was hot in Irbia. Richie was a little upset by the fact that she now had a ton of beautiful dresses. But then the girl noticed a very large jar with some kind of plant inside. She looked at it in surprise and said she'd never seen one before. Ferelman explained that this plant is called soft grass, and Irbia has a special climate, so many rare herbs can be found there. The man admitted that he usually ignores plants that have a weak effect, but he knows that she is conducting her research. The doctor asked him if he bought the flower because he thought she might like it, and he replied that it wasn't only for that reason. The lady thanked him. Richie had heard that the herbs growing in Irbia had a special effect. Doctors only began trading with each other more frequently when the healer in her past life turned 19. And Irian's death and the subsequent commotion happened just as she was preparing to begin her research. Several days pass, and the main character, handing her mentor her document with the completed work, asks him to check it. The doctor says she learned that the soft grass affects the environment and that it can be used for Irian's symptoms. The little girl added just as decisively that if she was right, then, even without knowing the origin of his illness, she could cure it. The man was intrigued by the assistant's words, but he said she had been rather fussy in her prescription. She replied that there was no other way. The doctor warned that if she wanted to use this treatment, she would need to go to Irbia, but the young Duke was only 14 years old. In justification of this, the girl said that Irian is the only heir of the Sirius family, and he could die if his illness is not taken seriously. Richie also understands that if he stays here, the Baron might do something, but in another country he will be protected from him and his son. Nervously clutching the fabric of her robe, the healer said that they had to take him to Irbia as soon as possible. She told the Viscount that he, as a doctor, must do everything possible to cure him. The young assistant was about to say something else, but suddenly felt Ark's hand on her head. He said she had done a good job, and he would speak to the mistress about it. But then they became modest, and the man said that it was thanks to his instinct that he needed to buy this grass, but she said that it was thanks to her intelligence. The doctor and his wife continued to argue about who had made the greatest contribution to finding a cure, and Dill smiled and thought about how similar they were. Seated in a luxurious living room with his assistant, the Duchess and her son, Ferrelman told the woman that he had something important to tell her. She noticed that there were a lot of people gathered in this room, so she believes that his case is very serious. But she warned him that if he wanted to quit, he'd have to wait until Richie grew up and replaced him. He said that wasn't the issue. A man claims his assistant has found a cure for Irian's disease. Her Highness's palms clenched and trembled. She asked excitedly what kind of medicine it was. The doctor explained that he would simply need to regularly eat a certain type of grass called soft grass, which grows in Irbia. The mother asked if it was difficult to find this plant, to which the doctor said no, and if you try, everything will work out. However, he tells Isabella that the land on her property is not good enough to grow soft grass, as it is sensitive to hot temperatures. The lady, her face bathed in sweat and in bewilderment, asked what they should do now. She was told that her son would have to undergo continuous treatment for 5 years in warm Irbia, where the temperature is relatively stable. The Viscount says that if Irian starts consuming the soft grass, the symptoms will soon disappear and he will return to normal life. The lady was still in shock, and Art continued to say that after his recovery he would need to undergo checkups, but his adult life would be much better, and besides, Irbia was safe. He also said that he and his assistant would continue to think about other treatment options if this option didn't work for them, but that this was the best solution for now. Suddenly, the Duchess quickly calmed down and declared that if they both thought so, then she would believe them and agree. She decided to ask Irian what he thought about this whole situation. He, nervously clenching his fists, said that even if he refused, he would not be able to be cured, which is what he really wanted. But he decided that he wanted to be healthy and look proud in front of others and Richie, so he smiled and agreed to undergo 5 years of treatment in another country. However, he asked his mother to send a couple of knights with him, because he wanted to continue fencing. The mother consoled her son by saying that they would still come and visit him 3 to 4 times a year, but the main character looked at them with a bit of sadness. Richie's spirits sank when she remembered from her past life that the sea route would soon be closed, making it difficult for the ducal family to visit. The reason why the protagonist needs to take Irian to another country as quickly as possible is because the sea route will be blocked by pirates. This will last for 5 years, until Prince Jade drives the bandits from the sea. Otherwise, they will be unable to reach Irbia or maintain contact with the young man by letter. But the healer is happy that her friend will be far away from Vederick, and without his influence he will grow up, independently forming his own personality. The lady understands that the boy must be cared for so he doesn't become weaker. Her top priority now is ensuring her heir grows up healthy. Later in the evening, the main character, showing her patient 2 red and a blue bags of medicine, says that the first is for a high fever, and the second is for if he feels dizzy. The boy says that she is overdoing it and that she can just visit him and bring him the necessary medicines, but she says that the sea route will soon be closed. The healer suddenly thanks her friend for agreeing to go, even though being far from his family is very difficult. She also apologizes for the pile of medications, but he just smiled and said that all this was necessary for his health. His words also made the protagonist smile, because she thought that even though he was a child, he behaved like an adult in such situations. Irian admitted he'd like her to accompany him, but the doctor said she needed to stay. He agreed and asked her to pack the things on the table. When the lady asked what it was, my lord said it was Veteric's candy, and he said it could replace healthy food without causing any harm. Richie was very wary when she heard that it was Veteric who gave these suspicious sweets to the heir. Approaching the gentleman intimidatingly, she asked why he had never told her anything about this, but he stated that it had happened a long time ago. Even though the baby said that he hadn't eaten them for a long time, the doctor was still shocked that all this time she thought she knew everything about his nutrition. The doctor guesses that if the manipulator secretly gave sweets to his brother, then this cannot be something healthy, but rather the opposite. She firmly stated that he would not take these chocolates with him to Erbia. The young duke asked in surprise why. She explained that if he ate unhealthy sweets, it would hinder his recovery, and she had never heard of a disease that could be cured with candy. The girl asked her friend to take her words as advice from a doctor. He agreed, then asked his friend to lie down on the bed next to him. Richie was very surprised by his request and at first embarrassedly said that she couldn't. But Irian, whose expression became as cute as a little puppy's, asked again if she was sure she couldn't do it. The heroine, struck to the very heart by this pitiful look, realized that she could not resist. She did agree, though, much to her friend's delight. The lady thought it was no big deal, since they were only parting for a long time. She lay down on the bed, and Irian said with a smile that this was the first time they had ever lain like this, and when he left, he would remember this moment with a thrill in his chest. The heroine smiled tenderly and told him that he should return safe, sound, and healthy. The doctor gently touched the heir's cheek with her palm and thought that even if she was not there, he was obliged to grow up strong. The boy laughed and asked if she was that worried about him. Turning his face closer to her, Irian asked why she was so sad if they would still see each other often. She didn't say anything in response, because she felt even sadder, knowing that they wouldn't be able to see each other until they grew up. Suddenly, the legacy tells his friend that he will need her help with something. The girl asked what he needed, and the young man asked her not to forget him and the fact that they were closer to each other than just friends. But the next moment, he earnestly asked her not to tell anyone about this except him, and the protagonist promised that she would not do this. Taking her friend by the hand, she said that she would think of him every day for the next 5 years, after which she asked him to return safely. Irian asked her the same thing and said that he would always think about her too.